Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys, the online news show. So we've got a hell of a packed show for you guys today. We've got a peace deal signed in Versailles. The Israelis are livid, and we're including the Israelis that are pretending to be Americans here. We'll have that story for you a little bit later. And it's J.D. Vance now versus Israel first. That is an interesting turn of events. Joe Kent will join us later to talk about the former National Counterterrorism Director. And later in the program, Jim Acosta is going to join us. So a lot going on. Speaking of a lot going on, we're going to start out with something really interesting, different at the top of the show here. Joining us now on the Young Turks are Alec Baldwin and Mark Morey. Mark is the director of Baristas versus Billionaires, and Alec is one of the producers of that movie. And we want to find out all about it. So welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having us here.
Yeah, no problem. So Mark, let's start with you. Tell us what the movie's about.
Well, it's Baristas versus Billionaires. It's about the Starbucks union drive that started at a single store in Buffalo, New York in 2021 and has now spread to 700 Starbucks stores around the country. But this is part of a bigger movement of young people taking matters into their own hands and standing up against the billionaires.
Yeah, so Alex, speaking of that, look, you've been a lifelong liberal. Everybody knows that. You've been on the left fighting for these type of causes. So, and if we're being honest, you know, I'm in the same place as you are, and we've been losing for a long time, for decades, right? And I think the main reason we've been losing is money in politics. But what's your sense of, you know, whether Democrats have done enough in the past to help out in situations like this, how bad the situation is with money in politics, and whether you see a spark of hope here now?
Well, that's a good question. I think that you know, the Democrats seem to have necessarily in their mind a lot more significant issues than unionizing a coffee chain. You know, they have a lot of, I don't need to go into too much detail about that, about what this time in our lives has meant, what it's cost, how it's framed the political landscape. But at the same time, I'm more interested in smaller on the ground issues now. You know, my biggest issue I worked on for years, for decades, was campaign finance reform. And that seems to be in a coma now, since Citizens United. And Mark, who I've known for years, he asked me to join him in helping to produce this film and market this film. And I love the story. I mean, many people would use a cliche to say it's like David and Goliath, but it is sort of. The employees of Starbucks, especially in the beginning where we depict them in Buffalo, they're working and living under unnecessarily punitive conditions. And I wanted to do what I could to help them, even in my smallest way.
You know, Alec, I want to hear your thoughts on what those punitive conditions are in just a moment. But, you know, to kind of bolster the argument you're making here, just last September, Fast Company had reported that Starbucks had closed, just completely closed 59 of their unionized stores. And you know, they're selling it as, oh, this is all about restructuring, we have declining sales, and so that's the reason why we shut these stores down. It had nothing to do with unionization. But I do think that the stores they selected did have something to do with unionization. And rather than respect the fact that these employees had voted in favor of unionizing and actually engage in negotiations, the executives over at Starbucks decided to shut these stores down entirely. And so what I'm curious about is, what do you see as a path forward for workers who want to fight back? I mean, Starbucks workers also went on strike last November. And unfortunately, they're still not being recognized as part of their efforts to unionize. What do you think workers on the ground can do to kind of get past or fight back effectively against the powers that be? Because, you know, state by state, you have all these laws, at-will laws, that allow employers to fire you without giving you a real reason why they're firing you in the first place. It seems like everything is stacked against the workers. So do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? And if so, how do we get there?
Well, unionizing, whether it was 100 years ago or now, is not without its costs. Many of the people who are involved in this will have to prepare themselves for the fact that they may lose their job. But the people in the film very thoroughly and very eloquently talk about the conditions that they work under and the problems they're having. And I don't want to use the word abused, but they were certainly mistreated. They were mistreated spectacularly in terms of schedule and just how it wasn't really very fair what they had to work a very modestly paying job. And so your point about what can be different or how can we maybe have a better impact on this now, there are states in the country right now where they're going to fight and they may lose. Because, as you said, management is allowed to treat them any way they want to. And I think if we frame this, or if they frame, I should say, this message the right way, people will understand that, Starbucks is not a gas station.
Right.
You don't go to a gas station and put your credit card in a machine and the gas comes out. That's what happens. But you don't do that in a coffee shop. There are people there. There are human beings who work there and who are mistreated. And I think that has to change.
I used to be a coffee bean and tea leaf barista, and it is incredibly difficult work. Not only are you dealing with people who are, grouchy and they want their coffee immediately, you're on your feet for 8+ hours, and you have a billion orders to deal with. So it is very difficult labor, and I believe people should be compensated appropriately for the work they do. But one other thing that I wanted to ask Mark about is, Mark, the landscape for workers is rapidly changing with the development of artificial intelligence. Right. Does the film at all touch on that issue? Because what the wealthiest business owners in this country want to do more than anything is just replace workers with robots. Is that something that you touch on in the film at all?
Well, no, we don't directly touch on people losing jobs to AI. That's an important issue, and there's a lot more than just people losing jobs to that issue. So we don't go into that, but you do make an appearance in the film, Anna, and we're thrilled about that.
Ooh, I didn't know. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's when you're talking about Victoria Conklin being fired. That clip is in the film.
Yeah, that's great. So look, also a friend of the show, Susan Sarandon, is narrating the movie. So there's a lot of reasons to see baristas versus billionaires. Mark, let me stay with you. So look, you've got Susan and Alec and a lot of other folks who are prominent people now saying, come on, let's fight for the average American worker, and that's beautiful. And you're an Emmy-nominated director, and this, so you've got all that momentum, right? So, but which side are our so-called leaders on? I mean, it's baristas versus billionaires, and you see Howard Schultz testifying in front of Congress in the movie. Have our politicians helped at all, or have they hurt, or have they been neutral?
Well, there was a hearing in both the House and the Senate in an attempt to shed more light on this and bring it to the American public. And Bernie Sanders called the hearing in the Senate, which you're referring to, and he had to threaten Howard Schultz with a subpoena in order to even get him to testify. So, and Bernie has gone to picket with the workers in New York City, along with Mayor Mamdani. And so some politicians are doing what they can to bring light to this issue.
Yeah, shocking that it's Bernie Sanders and Zohran Mamdani. Of course, right? So, Alec, one more thing for me. You've taken a lot of flack in your life for being on the left, for being a do-gooder. It was such a funny thing to get criticized for. I can't believe you're trying to do good in the world. What's your sense of the zeitgeist now, right? Before, the media is kind of, labels you the do-gooder. Some of the politicians are against you, et cetera. But these days, you see these young people who are baristas fighting back and being so brave. You see Mamdani winning in New York against all odds. And you see, I don't know, guys like Ro Khanna rising up. I don't know, and it feels like the young people in this country just don't want to hear the crap of mainstream media and the politicians anymore. So what's your sense of it? Do you have a hope here about an uprising that this unionizing effort is a part of?
Well, I find that American politics particularly on a national level. I mean, so on a state level, it's different. And certain organizations that I worked with, and I am working with now, are trying to address things on a state level because that might be more effective. But in American federal politics, things swing like a pendulum. You've got Clinton in there for 2 terms, and then you've got Bush in there for 2 terms, and then you've got Obama in there for 2 terms. You know, it just goes back and forth, and people in America are very reactive. You know, they're very, very strong, you know, swinging in another way. Now, when Trump is gone, and believe it or not, that's not going to be forever. He will be gone in a couple of years. The question becomes, what was the damage that was done to democracy itself by the Trump administration? I never dreamed, by the way, that so many people would come to his aid. I never dreamed there were that many bad people who were on a list to participate in government service. I never believed how many of them would show up to work with him. However, it's going to end. Things are going to change. And we need to start to say, what are the things that were destroyed or put in a coma that were affected by Trump's administration? Because it seems like it's a bottomless list. You know, it's a very long list. I do have hope that when Trump is gone, we'll see, you know, just normalcy and sanity. And go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious what you think about this, because Trump has served as a reliable distraction and excuse by what I believe is the mainstream Democratic Party, the establishment, if you will. And I think that they have skirted taking responsibility for their own failures and representing the best interests of American workers, the American people. So, I mean, do you think that the Democratic Party has been adequately held accountable for its own failures?
I think that on a wholesale level, no. I think when the comment was made by Hillary the other day that she felt that Biden's campaign was a mistake or the way it was run was a mistake, you could almost tell in the beginning, or you had a suspicion that Biden wasn't really ready. He wasn't able. And but he went on to become the nominee and run again. And or he ran. He wasn't the nominee. But the point is that in this country, people are they're filled with fear, and Americans aren't used to being filled with fear. Americans have always believed the country was the strongest country, the smartest country, the best country. So when things happen like 9/11, or now we're in a war with Iran, Americans aren't used to losing. And when they do, not necessarily lose, but when they do have a tough time, they're not ready for that in a way. And what we need as Americans to realize that to get back to something healthy and right and strong for our country is going to take some sacrifice from the American people. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned about me being attacked by people about liberal politics. I have never once worked on a campaign for an issue that lined my own pockets. Never, not one time. Now, when the head of an oil company gets up and says, I want to drill in the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, no one questions that. He's doing his job. It's business. But at the same time, he's going to shove a lot of money in his pocket. That's not the case with me. Campaign finance reform, reproductive rights for women, gun control, anything I've been federal money for the arts, not one put a penny in my pocket. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, I wrote about that in my book, not in regards to you, Alec, but overall, like that concept of like, if you try to do good in the world that doesn't help you, everybody attacks you, tries to find some sort of hypocrisy. Did you take the wrong kind of plane? Blah, blah, blah. But if you do bad in the world, you're a defense contractor, you're an oil company executive, no one ever says, hey, how come you never help anyone else, right? Like that's, so it's this weird system in the media that helps the bad guys and attacks the good guys. It's so bizarre. That's why I appreciate that you guys made this movie, because it's important to use the media to also do good in the world.
I think Americans now, what they both want and need is very commonsensical. They want common sense. They want to know that if Trump is canceling renewable energy projects all over the place. Why? Renewable energy is a gift. I remember on the South Shore of Long Island, there was a NIMBY response to wind turbines being put off the South Shore of Long Island, near where I grew up. And I thought to myself, I see wind turbines when in farm fields or offshore, wherever they are, and they're like the Statue of Liberty to me. They're a sign of our energy freedom. And it's the smartest thing we could possibly be doing is covering as much of this country. That makes sense. I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know. But covering this country with more solar, renewables, what have you. And I think that getting people to understand, that's leadership. Leadership, real leadership, is about guiding people towards something that's to their benefit. And there are some degree of sacrifice that we must take along that way.
Yeah. All right, well, I'll end on a fun fact. And so the movie's Baristas versus Billionaires. We'll put the link in the description box so everybody can check out the website associated with it. Alec, I'm sure you don't remember this. About 20 years ago when we first started the Young Turks, I was playing football with one of the other guys who worked here in the Valley. I see you running around the park somewhere around Studio City. And I'm like, that's Alec Baldwin. He's like, no, he's
Van Nuys, Sherman Oaks Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Van Nuys, I used to play football with my friends there every weekend.
Yeah.
Until all of us collectively, our wives told us, we have a baby now. You're not going anywhere for the weekend.
Totally.
Get back here.
Exactly
no
what happened to us.
No more football for you. To me, totally.
But one weekend we ran into Alec and he says, "Hey, you mind if we throw the ball around?" And we said, "Yeah, sure, that'd be amazing. Yeah, you're Alec Baldwin. Yeah, let's." My God, do you have an arm? Do people know that about you?
Not anymore. No, not anymore. I'm 68 years old and I have a 3-year-old baby.
Wow.
I have 7 kids, and my life every day is wow. I wake up every morning and go wow. You have kids, Anna?
No.
Well, I have.
Enjoy that, Anna. Enjoy that while you can.
Every day.
All right. Well, now you know something else about Alec. All right, Alec Baldwin, Mark Moore, you guys are amazing. Thank you for doing the movie. Everybody check it out. Both. We appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're gonna take a quick break. Like I said, a little bit later in the program, Joe Kent, and in fact, when we come back next, Joe Kent, and he's gonna help us break down the memorandum of understanding. So stay right here.
I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter, in this verse. I don't care. I don't care, I don't believe in it, and I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
No part of Gaza has been left unscathed. Ain't a whole lot left. I don't know why they need any more bombs. Let us be clear. The United States provided $18 billion in military aid to Israel. Netanyahu indiscriminate bombardment have killed more than 50,000 civilians, 60% of whom are women, children, paramedics, and journalists. All of this is against basic human decency. You don't starve children with absolutely no humanitarian aid getting into Gaza. It is a war crime. It is illegal for the United States government to provide Israel with more offensive weapons. History will not forgive us.
All right, back on the Young Turks, the online news show. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys. And Joe Kent's gonna join us in a minute, and it's about this story. Let's watch.
Anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the president of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in.
Wow, look at JD Vance or any American politician taking on Israel. Things have taken a turn. So we're gonna talk about how we signed the memorandum of understanding that just happened, the ramifications, how Israel first is striking back, and in a minute, Joe Kent's gonna join us in that conversation to help us sort it out. Anna, tell us all about it.
That's right, Cenk. So President Donald Trump did in fact sign the memorandum of understanding in Versailles, and the president of Iran, Masoud Pezeshkian, has also signed the MOU, which is good news. And as you heard from that clip, JD Vance, along with President Donald Trump, appear to have had enough with those who are trashing this avenue to a potential peace deal. In fact, Trump has just posted today that the United States is committed to peace, and we encourage everyone in the Middle East region to maintain their commitment to allowing our negotiations to beautifully unfold. The markets are loving what is happening with oil prices way down and stocks way up. We expect a complete ceasefire on all fronts, including Lebanon, Hezbollah, and Israel. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And there are plenty of politicians in Congress right now who are furious with the MOU. They're speaking out against it. I'll give you a few examples. Bill Cassidy is one of those individuals, saying that Reagan is rolling over in his grave. Iran's nuclear ambitions were not curbed, and they have learned that threatening the Strait of Hormuz works and will undoubtedly leverage. They will undoubtedly leverage in the future. Now Iran gets to build brand new infrastructure under this deal. Before the war, the Strait was open. Iran was being crushed by sanctions, and 13 service members were still alive. Now 13 Americans are dead. Families have paid billions at the pump. Sanctions will be lifted, and the bombing has stopped. This is the worst foreign policy blunder in decades. Senator Cassidy isn't the only one. There are others, but here to discuss this with us, along with some of the details of the memorandum of understanding, is the former director of National Counterterrorism Center, Joe Kent. Joe, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. No problem. Joe, let me start with an interesting question. Is Trump back?
It really looks like he is. I mean, I think it's very significant that he himself went and signed the treaty last night. I don't think any of us were expecting that. It was supposed to be on Friday in Geneva. They were going to send the vice president initially, and then President Trump flipped the script, and he showed up and he in person, and he signed the MOU himself, which means this has his full support. Between that and the statements that he's made over the last 24 or 48 hours, telling Israel that they need to knock it off, especially with regards to Lebanon, talking about essentially Iran having a pragmatic need to defend itself and just recognizing the fact where we are in this conflict. And the most important thing is reopening the Straits of Hormuz. I feel like President Trump is back. And then the great press conference that JD Vance, our vice president, had this afternoon, really kind of trying to put the Israeli leaders in their place and let them know that we're serious about this as well. I'm more optimistic than I've been since I resigned.
Yeah, so now we're on the left, and I certainly am. And so I didn't want Trump in the first place, so didn't much believe in him, but you did, right? And you worked as his National Counterterrorism Center director, and so that's why I phrased it as having him back from your perspective. And so from that perspective, are you, given how much you went through, given the fact that you resigned, given the massive pushback against you from mainstream media, other Republicans, et cetera, are you now surprised at Trump and Vance beginning to represent America first again, given all that you've been through?
Just relieved. I mean, look, there was a while there where I thought, did I get this entire thing wrong? Did I misread President Trump? And I always said, like, I can't figure this out. I don't think I misread him. I think he believed in these principles. But what took place with the way that the war was forced upon us by the Israelis and pretty much every action that we've taken since then before, the last 48 hours or so, I was really second guessing, myself and my own judgment. However, the way that he has behaved, I think that he's snapped out of it. I don't know exactly, what drove him to get us into this war beyond the Israeli influence I've talked about before. There was always something there that I couldn't put my finger on. And I don't know what snapped in President Trump over the last 24, 48 hours, but he does seem like he's had enough. He seems like right now he's listening to what I have always believed his gut instincts to be, where he's not listening to the donors. He's not listening to all this, probably very, very flattering talk that was coming from the Israelis. He's looking at results. And this was what I was hoping that he was going to do, where he sat back and he looked at the results of the war. He looked at the markets. He looked at what this meant to America's standing in the world. And he said, okay, now I need to make a business decision and I need to cut us a better deal and get us out of this losing deal. So I'm mostly just relieved. Cautiously optimistic, I guess, too.
Cautiously optimistic is the best way to describe the way I'm feeling right now. There have been too many moments where you think, should I be optimistic? And then, of course, the disappointment comes immediately after. But it does appear as though Trump and, based on the messaging we're hearing from Vice President Vance, seems like they're really going to stick to this effort at ending the war and moving toward a permanent peace deal. But, I do want to push back a little bit on what changed with Trump, what flipped. Honestly, I don't think the president had a choice. Unless he was willing to watch the global economy melt down, there was no military option, as you have eloquently mentioned in multiple interviews. There was no military option in getting control of the Strait of Hormuz. There was no way we were going to topple the IRGC, and we have lost soldiers. And so I just think it got to a point where Trump looks at the math and realizes either we keep going in the direction we're going and the entire global economy just melts down, or we end this now. What do you think?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. One of, I think, the things that appealed to me and a lot of us about President Trump is that he wouldn't get stuck in some, pie in the sky principle of like, we have to stay here to liberate everyone or to fight the terrorists over there so we don't have to fight them over here. He was always a much more pragmatic guy. Again, that's why this entire thing kind of threw me for a loop. So to see him kind of wake up and be like, oh man, there actually is no military way out of this, regardless of what all the neocons are saying about how we should just be, back to kicking butt and dropping bombs. He's like, well, that doesn't work. And then he looked at the markets and he looked at the effect on the economy here and what that's going to mean for American consumers and American taxpayers, and American voters, especially going in the midterm. And then he got back on the realism and said, we actually need to take action here. And I think something that's been really significant is the way that they've approached Israel, because we've heard President Trump before say he wants to get a deal with the Iranians, but they would never address the Israelis or try to move in a meaningful way to restrain the Israelis. And we're seeing a real effort right now to at least call out the Israelis. And there's even some rumors and reporting of us potentially withholding some arms supplies and shipments to Israel. And I just think that's absolutely key, because the Israelis, I fear, are going to continue in Lebanon. And we've already seen the Iranians put out some warning that, hey, we mean business about what's taking place in Lebanon. So I do think our mettle is going to be tested here. But based on the rhetoric so far, I remain, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, following up on that. So Vance had a lot of harsh words for Israel. So Mark Levin's super upset, and all of Israel First is going after Vance, and they're saying, oh, now we're going to take note of who's going to run in 2028, and we're going to cut off your money. Okay, you're kind of telling on yourself, but anyway.
They do it every day. It's amazing, right? They deny it and then they tell on themselves. But
yeah. So, okay, but Vance also said something similar to what you just said there. He said, hey, listen, what's the alternative? He's like, look, you're a country of 9 million people. You're telling us what to do, but to your point, we don't really, he didn't say this part out loud about, we don't really have much military options left. Running out of interceptor missiles, these drones are way more effective than we realize. It's really neutralized our advantage in a lot of ways. We can't reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and the global economy is going to melt down unless we open up the Strait of Hormuz. So we're out of options. And so that leads to my question to you, which is, what would the Israelis say in response to that? Would they say, yeah, we know the global economy is going to melt down. We don't care. We don't care if the whole world burns as long as you follow our orders. But then even so, how does that help Israel in the long run? I don't know if they are thinking about the long run at all. But did they ever give a viable alternative where it wouldn't massively hurt America? Or did they just say, walk the plank, we don't care how much it hurts you?
I mean, the Israelis, to their credit, they put their country first, and they never said, well, let's think about what this is going to do to America. And they really seem to just believe that we would always blindly support them. So the Israelis, whenever I would deal with them behind closed doors, they were always very upfront. It wasn't about, preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. They believed that this was the time to take down the regime, to do the decapitation strike, to take down the Ayatollah. When we would push back and say, hey, don't you think this is going to result in like either a rally around the flag effect, or even if you get what you want and the regime crumbles, then doesn't Iran basically become a chaotic, Syrian civil war, Libya failed state? And the Israelis were just like, yeah, but then they're too busy bogged down fighting themselves than they are fighting us. So the ramifications for the region, for the world economy, and especially for us, Israel never thought about that. And this is why I always go back to, we have just never been honest with ourselves about, like, we have very different strategic goals than the Israelis. And the Israelis are comfortable with chaos. They, to a certain degree, thrive in chaos, and they go about fighting and prosecuting wars in a much different, much more barbaric way than we do. They do things that we can't get away with, that we wouldn't let our soldiers do, yet we pay for all of it, and so therefore we bear the ramifications for that behavior. It's never made sense from our perspective. And again, to hear the vice president come out and say things to this effect, I heard him in another interview talk about how when he was questioning the Israelis, he would say to them, do you want Iran to become like Libya? Like, how does that benefit you guys at all? And really, the Israelis right now just seem to be hell bent on going to war with as many of their neighbors as they possibly can, gobbling them up as much terrain as they possibly can. And this Likud-led government doesn't even seem to be thinking about what this means in the future for Israel. I've heard some Israeli commentators say that, like, this is a big mistake, and we are really ruining the one ally that we had in the world. And then the VP said the same thing today in the press conference. So, it's all a breath of fresh air. And I think more people are waking up. And I think the president finally was feeling the fact that most people are starting to move this way, and they see it as well. So I think the power of social media, podcast shows like this, where you have like a broad consensus left and right, and all the independent people that are saying basically the same thing. I think it's really powerful. I think the president hears it.
In fact, I want to go to, I believe, the moment that you're referring to with Vice President Vance. This is video B6. I'd like our audience to see what he had to say.
Even in like the early 2000s, the Israelis were much more worried about Iran than the United States was, right? We were much more worried about Al-Qaeda, like a different branch of Islamic terrorism. So even when we've been very aligned, we're just different countries that have different objectives. I think that in this particular operation, again, where interests were aligned is we wanted Iranian conventional military power to be much weaker, to be decimated. The Israelis shared that objective. Do I think that there are maybe, I don't know if Bibi thinks this, but do I think there are people within Israeli society who would like to turn Iran into Libya, basically a failed state with 90 million people? Probably, but I don't know that Bibi wants that. I've actually never had that conversation with him. It'd be an interesting conversation to have. I'll tell you right now, is Iran turning into a Persian Libya good for the United States of America? Absolutely not.
I mean, it wouldn't be good for the global community. Iran is a country of 92 million people, and for all the complaints we hear about these mass migration events, these refugee crises that take place, this would be one hell of a refugee crisis if Israel, and I do also believe Netanyahu, were to get their way in turning Iran into a failed state. But Joe, I want to ask you about something that I'm increasingly concerned and worried about, because you have pretty prominent voices on the pro-Israel side who are just saying it out loud, and Mark Levin happens to be one of them. Just yesterday, he made reference to Israel's nuclear weapons. And I'm worried that it's gonna get to a point where they're genuinely gonna consider dropping a nuke on Iran. I'm curious what you think about that.
I'm very concerned about it as well. This has always been the big concern with trying to find a military objective in Iran, because taking any kind of like morality off the table, if you want total capitulation from a country that is the size of Iran, that has the demographics, that has the geography, that has the terrain, especially that Iran has, even if everyone in America was okay with us sending our whole military over there to fight and we had a coalition, we still couldn't actually go in there and force our way in and occupy the entire country in an effective way. It'd be a bloodbath of an insurgency. So whenever you play out the military equation, the only way to get that military solution or that total surrender, that total capitulation, it literally is what we did in Japan. I mean, and obviously morally, America doesn't want to do that. But again, this goes back to Israel and us have drastically different views on how to fight. So I think there is a scenario that exists. I don't know how likely it is, but there is a potential where Israel does say this is existential to us. We feel that Iran is going to get some kind of advantage. They're going to survive. Now they're in a more powerful state, which they actually are because of the war. Now, then where does that leave Israel? And so that does concern me that there are hardliners there that would consider it. And I don't know if we would, if they'd made that decision to go forward with it, I don't know if we would be able to act in time to actually stop them. And this is why I think right now that the president, and I think he's leaning this way, we do need to meaningfully restrain Israel. So they start having those hard conversations back inside of Israel, like, hey, do we want to lose American aid forever right now at this very moment when we've picked fights with pretty much everybody? Or do we want to be able to rejockey our position? Because I know they're having those discussions right now in Israel. So I think we need to make sure that they know they can't cross that red line for sure. But then also we are going to continue to take away support from them because we want to ensure that they are restrained, because that's never happened to them before. So I think if we're not strong in a moment like this, something catastrophic like that could happen.
Yeah, so I want to ask two more questions about the future, because it leads to what you just said about how they've never been restrained, which is a kind of an amazing fact, right? That this country with a population of Papua New Guinea has never been restrained by America, right? We've always said yes to them, no matter how absurd the ask, no matter how big the ask, et cetera. And today, Times of Israel had an article where they explain, quote, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans to use pro-Israel senators and right-wing media personalities to influence the terms of a final agreement between the US and Iran. And so, and here I'll show the track AIPAC for some of these senators right now, like Bill Cassidy's taking at least 500. These are always at least guys because they get a lot more into their super PACs, but $536,000 from AIPAC. He's the guy who said Reagan would be rolling around in his grave, which makes no sense because Reagan's the guy who withdrew from Lebanon after Hezbollah killed a couple hundred Marines. So Reagan would have done the same exact thing as Trump, at least. Ted Cruz has gotten 1.4 million. Tom Tillis has gotten 405,000, and these guys are all current. Roger Wicker, 533,000, and these guys are all currently attacking Trump. The rule was you never attack Trump. Look at this, Joe Kent left the administration and he's a heretic and he should be destroyed. But yet, when Netanyahu snaps his fingers and says, hey, pro-Israel senators that are pretending to be Americans attack, they attack Trump and there's no consequences. Yeah. So given all of that, I'm a little worried that Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin has talked about, you know what, maybe we come back to this issue and this war after the primary, because they know that they have Congress in their back pockets. So how much do you think they have Congress in their back pockets, and how much does that make you worry about what happens after the primaries?
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty concerning because what the Israelis did after Midnight Hammer, they realized, everybody remembers the famous clip where Trump walked out on the White House lawn and he said the Israelis and the Iranians don't know what the F they're doing, and he kind of got Bibi to stop then, and so they did back off momentarily. They were happy, I think, that we did the Operation Midnight Hammer that gave Trump some confidence that we can conduct those operations. But they did come off the trigger just a little bit, and they were more subtle throughout the summer, fall, and winter. I think they realize that I'm sure that there's some argument being made inside Israel right now. Let's back off. Let's let Trump breathe throughout the midterms, and then let's come back with a vengeance, leading with our senators, our congressmen, et cetera. Let's make sure that all of them, because all of them right now that are up for election in November, they need those campaign donations. So they could, in a very meaningful way, I think, be more subtle. What kind of works in, I guess, our advantage here is that I do think Bibi, Smotrich, and Ben-Gvir and these guys, I don't feel like they're thinking that tactically. I mean, at least Bibi maybe a little bit, but Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, and like some of the more hardliners in Likud, they seem to want to try to force this. And if the more they force it right now, the mood that Trump appears to be in, the more they try to force it, the more I think he is going to push back. I just hope that we can hopefully get through to President Trump, or President Trump realizes that, you know, the strong words aren't going to do it, that we've got to actually take away a good deal of the aid from Israel, and then look at them and be like, this can get much worse. Like, we can take away even more from you guys. Do you really want to keep pushing? And then I think the more just light that we can shine on the influence that AIPAC and all these other groups have on getting congressmen and senators elected, and make that issue just radioactive with younger voters who are voting in larger and larger numbers, the more power the American people are going to actually have ourselves represented, and not just be bought out from under us by all these moneyed interests.
Final question for me, because I'm very curious what you think. Now, Iran has made clear that their red line is Israel continuing its occupation of southern Lebanon, continuing to batter not just southern Lebanon. I mean, they keep going further north with their bombing campaign. In the case where Iran retaliates, they make good on their promise, they retaliate against Israel as it's battering Lebanon, do you believe that President Trump will intervene in an effort to intercept missiles or protect Israel as, you know, this confrontation occurs?
I think in that last exchange, when the Iranians shot at Lebanon, we withheld. We at least didn't get involved. I mean, that's debatable, because we still gave them a lot of the equipment they used to shoot them and intercept as well. But we didn't get proactive and intercept those missiles. So I think right now, especially with Israel continuing to do operations in Lebanon, if I were the Israelis, I wouldn't count on it. And then the Israelis have to ask themselves, okay, if the Americans aren't going to come and bail us out because we've pissed off Trump so much, how many barrages can we withstand from the Iranians before it starts to make a huge difference here and they start taking casualties? If I were the Israelis, I wouldn't want to have to figure that out in real time while the missiles are raining down. And honestly, like right now, considering how President Trump is speaking towards the Israelis, I wouldn't want to test it if I were them either. But again, like, I'm not sure how much rationality there is there with that Likud faction. But I think the more clear that we can be to the Israelis right now and start taking things away from them, the better chance we have of preventing all that, and at least make them go into like a pause mode where they're not doing all these offensive operations in Lebanon. And again, that gets us closer. It gets us closer to the deal. And I think that the more time that the ceasefire holds, and the more talks that there are, and I'm really hoping at some point there's direct talks between at least the vice president and Iranian officials, if not the president and the Iranian president, the more of that happens, the harder it's going to be for us to get sucked back into this war. But we're in a really sensitive time period right here.
Yeah, so my last question is a good follow-up from that, because you're right, there's a debate within Israel. We saw Jonathan Kornikas the other day telling Mario Nafal, oh no, without America, we can't do these wars. Just militarily, strategically, we just don't have the capacity to do them. I mean, Mark Levin and the others here always puff up their chest. Israel's the greatest country in the world. We can do anything, right? But like, real strategists are like, are you kidding me? We're a tiny country that's like nearly irrelevant. Without the might of America, we got nothing, right? So, okay, so that's one camp. The other camp is Ben-Gvir and Smotrich going, oh no, southern Lebanon is now part of Israel. We're never giving it up. It's part of greater Israel. We're never ever going to leave. And if Iran says, no, you must leave, that sets up the scenario where Iran and Israel go to a full-scale war without us. So is that possible? Because of course, if Israel starts taking more and more casualties because they start running out of interceptor missiles, they're gonna howl and they're gonna say, oh, it's a new Holocaust, oh my God. Just because we were trying to murder them and take southern Lebanon and destroy everyone in their government, I can't believe we lost a single person. America owes us. right? And all the Wickers and the Cruzes are gonna come out and go, America owes Israel, America owes Israel, we can't let a single Israeli die, etc. So there'll be enormous pressure. And what I can't figure out is that last step. If Iran and Israel are in full-scale conflict, is it possible that we would sit it out? Or does that mean, nope, by definition, we're gonna get dragged back in?
I mean, I think obviously we'd be under immense pressure. The president would be under immense pressure from a ton of Republican senators, Democrat senators too. And same thing with the House, and then also the donors. And I think they would launch a pretty effective public relations campaign to try and get the president involved. And it would be very challenging for him. And it would be, I think, a big media fight. But again, I think this is why we need to take away things from Israel right now and be very, very frank with them. And I don't think the Israelis should be in the business. I know some of them are probably considering it. Like I think Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, I think their rationale is let's keep pushing until the war expands, and then America will have to get involved. But again, I just don't think that that's necessarily going to hold up, because I think that they have just crossed the line so many times that the president right now would be inclined to just let them try to fight it out on their own. If their theory of the case, what they have all their talking heads saying is that Israel can stand on its own and it really doesn't need the American aid. I mean, there is a scenario I think that exists that President Trump could say, okay, fine, well, you guys prove it. But I just think we've got to be clear with them right now that this deal has to hold. They've got to cut it out in Lebanon, or this is going to forever change our relationship with Israel, and they will go it on their own if they continue to attempt to disrupt the deal.
Yeah, I'm really glad we did this segment together, because based on your last couple of answers, I'm now sure Netanyahu himself is insatiable. I mean, he did a video today saying we're never leaving southern Lebanon. So that means they're definitely gonna try to drag us back in militarily. Like they're almost gonna set up a situation where they know they're gonna get hit, quote unquote, bad enough that they get to cry to America and say, you now must defend us. Since we got ourselves into a mess we can't get out of, we need daddy's help. And then what happens at that point, as we all three of us just talked about, we don't know.
Right.
We know what should happen, which is see you wouldn't want to be you. If there's a problem with the war you ordered, maybe you shouldn't have ordered it.
But
right?
as Trump is under that tremendous pressure, I think it's important to give him credit where credit is due. Even though I am furious that we entered the war to begin with, right now he's dealing with that pressure. And one thing I know about Trump is he loves admiration and validation. So if people are giving him credit for pulling out, I think that will help him kind of hold the line, if you will.
Yeah, so we'll see how that.
Voters too. I mean, just the tone from Trump and the tone from the vice president. I mean, they are praising him right now, and I think most Americans after this war for the last 60, 70 days, they're really, really excited to see someone actually holding the Israelis accountable. So if I were the Israelis, I wouldn't count on that bet. It's a huge gamble for them to make.
Yeah, I mean, look, when Vance gave the speech saying the Israelis better know their role, right? Basically, there was like an explosion of joy in the country. Like I saw it in social media, right, left, didn't matter. I mean, we got left-wingers like us going, attaboy, JD Vance, which I didn't think I'd ever say in my life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's great to see a single American politician stand up to Papua New Guinea. I mean, Israel. All right, Joe Kent, thanks for joining us, brother. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Guys, great to see you. Thank you.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break. We've got a lot more updates on this coming up, including the reactions of the crazed Israelis in America. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT. By the way, apparently we have scarf bundles about the World Cup on shoptyt.com. That's fun. Check that out. All right, let's see. Oh, there they are, isn't it? Okay, yeah. Shoptyt.com. All right. So, by the way, I've been trying to get people to say chant "Free, Free Palestine" at the World Cup events or wherever people gather. Independent of me, the Bosnians apparently were doing that in Canada before one of the games. So here Bosnians. Scots are awesome, and they're with the Palestinians. So if they do it, that would be amazing. All right, let's hope that they do. Okay, Hannah Hartman writes in, holy crap, hi Alec Baldwin. That's a fun comment. Old Woodsman 53 says, I've never ever had a Starbucks coffee. Are they any good?
Not really.
They're mid. They're like the definition of mid. Okay, and that's amazing.
And overpriced, to be honest with you. Considering how much they be charging for those coffees, I think they should pay their unionized workers what they're asking for.
Yeah, I was surprised that you never had a Starbucks until I saw your handle, Old Woodsman. Yeah, if you're out in the woods, less likely. Yeah, I got
Paradise.
you. Jenks Tricep Fury says, the amount they charge for a coffee, they should have plenty of money to pay your people living wage. The talented people are the true product. Janet, AKA Gemstar Dragon says, the stress of my financial situation has raised my blood sugar extremely high and causing pain issues regularly. Okay, well today's a good day though. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Rose Roscoe, thank you for gifting a membership on YouTube. Anonymous, thank you for joining through tyt.com/join. We appreciate it. I'll just do a fun comment here to continue the good spirits here. Silver XT1GE writes in on YouTube member section. I can't believe how beautiful Anna is. It blows me away every time.
Come on. Thank you. I did not expect that.
Okay, just God bless. Why not? All right, now let me help you guys out. We use Shopify for shoptyt.com, and they've been awesome. So we tried a lot of different things, and nowadays we're positive Shopify is the right way to go because it makes everything simpler. So if you're looking for a good-looking website, you're thinking of opening up an online store, you got to go with Shopify. It's got that iconic purple shop pay button, and it's literally the best converting checkout on the planet. I think about 10% of all merch is sold online is through Shopify. So everybody's convinced that they're the right way to go. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/TYT. That's shopify.com/TYT. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right, well, we had that wonderful interview and conversation with Joe Kent, and we kept referencing all of these moments featuring the vice president or members of the Trump administration who have been pushing back against the critics of the MOU. I'd like to show you some of those videos, okay? So let me set that up. Vice President Vance has been aggressively promoting the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran, which is really good to see. Now, he is, of course, getting hounded by the MOU's critics, and he responds to some of them in this next clip.
You've seen people in their system, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who've attacked the deal. And I guess my response to them would be, what is your exact proposal? And you're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have. Look at what we've accomplished. First of all, Americans have protected a lot of Israeli lives through our missile systems and through our missile programs over the last few months. We have destroyed their nuclear program. We have got the Iranians in a point where they're offering things, again, whether they'll actually act on them, we'll see, but they're offering things that would have been the stuff of dreams even 6 months ago. So let us play this negotiation out. Let us see if the Iranian actions actually meet the Iranian words, and give a little bit of credit to the United States of America, which I think has been an incredible partner for the Israeli government for a long time.
I have so much I want to say about that clip, but Batia Ungar Sargon, who of course is a huge Israel supporter, has been responding to some of these moments featuring the vice president, and she calls it the Tucker Carlification of our foreign policy and of the Trump administration.
Then Tucker Carlson should be enormously proud. Yeah. I hope the Democrats do a Cenk Uygurification of their Israel policy and withdraw all funding, not another dollar. Okay, let's get back to JD Vance, because those are some incredible words we have not heard from almost any American politician in our lifetimes about Israel. You can't kill your way out of this mess, implying that they're trying to kill their way out of the messes that they have created. And that is obviously true, but I didn't know our politicians were allowed to say true things about Israel.
Neither did I, and I love to see it. And in fact, Cenk, I don't know if you get this sense, but you can kind of tell that Vance, it's pouring out of him.
Oh yeah.
Right?
It feels like it's almost cathartic that he couldn't wait to say this. And he's like, oh, Trump, is it go time? Is it go time? It's go time, let's go. Okay, let me tell you about these Israelis and their 9 million tiny little country telling us what to do, okay? So look, I want the Democrats to be much, much tougher. I want them to be much more populist. I want them to have an edge.
To be fighters.
Kind of like Graham Plattner. And the entire establishment of the Democratic Party goes, no, be more like Adam Schiff. Have a tie and don't say anything interesting and please all the donors. Well, look, if the Democrats had a guy that came out like JD Vance and said, who the hell are these guys to push us around, okay?
Right.
Number one, that should be us. We're supposed to be the pro-peace party, etc. It would have gotten the same reaction that Vance is getting today, which is extreme popularity. Because Americans have been waiting the whole time, just like Anna said about Vance, like, will someone finally stand up for America and not constantly kneel and grovel to this tiny country? And so seeing it today was refreshing for all of us.
But Cenk, to your point, I mean, look, I don't think, not all fighters wear a Cenk Uygur skin suit, meaning that not all fighters necessarily have to fight the way you do, although it is very cathartic for me and I always appreciate it. We just had a lengthy interview with Joe Kent. Joe Kent is a fighter, but he fights, like the aesthetics of his fight, I guess, a little different. So if you want to carry yourself as someone who wears a suit and tie and you're all polished or whatever, you can still be a fighter. The problem is, both parties in this country have been captured by Israeli interests. And so whatever excuse they've come up with for why they refuse to represent what's in the best interest of the United States, as opposed to what's in the best interest of Israel, I don't really care. I want you to represent the American people. I don't care if you're a Democratic lawmaker or Republican lawmaker. It is very obvious through their votes and through their actions that Americans are on the back burner as they're, again, looking out for the best interests of a foreign country with the population the size of, go ahead, Cenk.
Papua New Guinea.
People love that point that you bring up, and it is a really great point. Now, with that in mind, I want to go to the next video, because here we're gonna hear from Vance again, and he's warning Israel about the way they're perceived on the international stage. So maybe don't take a stab at your friends.
You've seen people within Bibi's cabinet who have come out and attacked the deal, and in some ways very personally attacked the president of the United States. And I guess my message to them would be twofold. Number one, Donald J. Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. And he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. And the second message I would give to some of those cabinet members, Bibi, to his credit, has not gone down this path, but to some of these cabinet members in Israel who are attacking the president of the United States, the other thing that I would say is that over the last 3 months, 2/3 of the defensive weapons that have protected your homeland have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars. The problem for Israel is not Donald J. Trump. And anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the president of the United States needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country is in. Thank you all.
The reference to their weapons and where they come from, appreciated. And look, this is the kind of stuff we've been saying on the show, and we say it even more aggressively, sometimes with foul language. So you might be thinking, what's the big deal? But think about it. This is the United States government, which has been dog walked by the Israelis decade after decade after decade. It feels good to hear the vice president say what he's saying during that presser.
Yeah, I'm gonna go further in a second. When he said wake up there, I saw several headlines in national media saying that was outrageous.
Of course, yeah.
Why would it be outrageous to tell a tiny country that's completely out of allies, hey, maybe you might not want to piss off the only ally you have left that's giving you all the money and military? That's actually the most obvious statement you could make. There's nothing outrageous about it, not 1%. But yet all over television today, this is an outrage, how dare they? Oh, here's a senator here for a Democrat, a Republican, an expert, and they all say, more war, more war. This is an outrage what J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are doing. They have to follow Israel. Why? Caitlin Collins, with outrage in her voice, when a Republican senator said, Iran also has a right to defend themselves. She's like, you're saying Iran has a right to defend themselves?
Okay, but let me be fair. I had that interpretation of that moment as well, but you also have to think about the 180 that just took place, because the conversation had to do with Iran's ballistic missiles, which at the behest of the Israeli government, our government was also fear-mongering about, including that very Republican lawmaker. So it was like a complete 180 out of nowhere, and she was shocked by it.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, that's fair,
Yeah.
and maybe that's why, but it's not about Caitlin Collins. It's about all the cable news anchors who seem horrified at the thought of peace,
Totally,
right?
yeah, I agree with you on that.
But the reason why I bring that up is because the reaction online has been, of course, the exact opposite, which leads me to this point. Guys, look, I don't agree with a single thing JD Vance has done in his entire life up until this moment, right? And I'm not sure I'm gonna agree with anything he does after this, okay? And in fact, I'm worried about something that might happen after this. But no, that was cathartic, and that energized everybody. And now Trump is saying similar things like, hey, what do you want us to turn Iran into Libya? We're not gonna do that for you. That's not an American interest. And that might work. That might get Trump's popularity back up single-handedly, because we're so starved for a strong American politician to tell Israel to take a walk, take a hike, right? Go pound sand.
Yes.
That alone could skyrocket the Republicans. They might be shocked at what happens next. Now, do I think that's merited? I mean, no, they've done one good thing here if they stay with it, and it's kind of obvious, and they've done everything else wrong. But will it have that effect? It probably will, because I think Washington is grossly underestimating how much this country hates Israel now.
I totally agree with you about how much this country hates Israel. But when we come back from the break, I actually want to get into what I believe the Israel First crowd is plotting, because they are plotting. And I'm going to give you two examples, Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin. We'll be right back.
What contributions to the progressive cause are you most proud of? I mean, I don't have super high aspirations for a singular role that I can play in the movement or anything. I try to present myself as what I think that I am, which is a progressive man who is driven by I think, well-interrogated and well-organized system of values that I try to stay consistent on, and I demonstrate that that's the sort of life that a person can lead and be successful and be happy and all of that. And that should not need to be done, but there are so many people on the right that are trying to push men in the opposite direction that I want to be able to do that. Along the way, if I can get people to care about some topics that they wouldn't necessarily care about, or that for some men they might think that's not a topic that they should be focused on, that's definitely something that I relish doing. And along the way, I mean, we've been able to introduce people to a lot of candidates. That's been a big part of what we've done. Not all of them necessarily got in office. Probably most of them did not. And a lot of them you might not even remember their names. But it was great to be able to provide people the platform where they had the chance of, making a difference. Obviously AOC and all that, but there's been a lot of great people along the way.
In the bonus episode for the members, we do some inside baseball. We're gonna look at John's desk. Nice little spaceship here. Nerd, but it is kind of look cool. Who has Legos? Oh no, he's taking apart a keyboard. Who has a mouse pad that's this big? He's got a dog with a nose that you can hang something on. You know what this desk screams to me? Nerd. And that's how we like him. We love Johnny Pie. He's got his own personality like everybody does at TYT. Come meet us all in the bonus episodes. TYT.com/team.
David Sorrell, Nina Turner.
Adam Green drop by.
Charlemagne.
Congressman, great to have you. It's great to be with you, Chang.
Your show is a great thing. You're informing people. A lot of the shows that I live on, my CNN, my MSNBC, and even Fox, and any of the other shows, NPR, they are so quick to decide that they know what this building means today.
The one thing that I hate that politicians do, they talk about the people they should be talking to.
Do they have any idea that they're the establishment and that they're hated, or do they not realize that at all?
People are so deeply in their little universe. I think it's very easy to not really question what you're doing.
Voters have a right to ask questions of any nominee, whether they're independent, Republican, or Democrat.
The system is duopoly that suppresses competition.
How is it the year 2024 and we're still like, maybe they'll talk about paid medical? Like how is that like at one level it's like, good, what we're talking about now. You're like, it's 2024. And that's always been the critique, your critique of us is, well, you guys give good speeches, you put out good tweets, but you're not wielding actual power. Now we're starting to.
My favorite news platform by far. It's not even close.
It's about a country and a principle, and that's what you and I both worked to achieve, and I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
If you want to go really hear what's going on honestly, you should tune into the Young Turks.
Thanks for doing such a great job. Please keep it up. Hang tough.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Oh, I like making you happy.
I didn't know about that.
This is a happy Anna Kasparian.
Awesome.
You're welcome, YouTube.
Join the Dragon Squad by becoming a YouTube channel member. Click the join button below or sign up on tyt.com/join to get access to fun emojis, a member-only chat, exclusive shop TYT designs, ad-free watching, and so many other amazing perks. Plus, you get bragging rights for being part of the coolest community on the internet and help us drive real positive change in the world. The Dragon Squad awaits, so join today.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Speedy Glass, thanks for joining through the join button below. We really appreciate it. It's a super good way to help the show, and we do need it because of our opinions on a certain country, Papua New Guinea, obviously. We are besieged. The Papua New Guineans are very adamant. Okay, anyways, so thank you for all of you. And ring the bell too. That's super easy, it's free, and it helps you keep up with the show. Casper, oh no, I've got the next story for you guys. Okay, we have Israel First plan for how to restart the war, and we're worried about it. Anna, tell us all about it.
What's amazing about the Israel Firsters is they're typically very candid about what they're plotting. And in this case, we have both Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro openly expressing what they intend to do. Let's start with Mark Levin. This is graphic 17. Time for a change in strategy, he writes on X. We should consider slow walking the enemy, building up our munitions, our oil reserves, get the price of gasoline down, get through the midterms, then knock them out. Instead of rushing to a deal, building up their oil industry, transferring billions to them, etc. Now, if this was just a one-off from Mark Levin, it probably wouldn't get my attention. But then you have Ben Shapiro vocalizing a very similar strategy. Take a look.
after the midterms, once those elections are over. And again, the president is deeply concerned about the economic health of the country right before the election. He believes that if the economy is doing better, if oil prices are lower, then that means that maybe Republicans hold the House. It means that Republicans hold the Senate. Okay, well, what does that mean for after the midterms? Well, I do trust that President Trump will start to enforce red lines after the midterms. The president was threatening just that yesterday.
If they don't honor the agreement, or some things aren't even mentioned in the agreement, it's a memorandum of understanding, but we have an understanding of certain things without writing it. And if they don't honor that, we'll probably go back to bombing them until they honor it. You know, it's amazing what bombs can do.
All right, so here's what I worry about, Cenk. If we rely on Israel's wonderful intel, I mean, they have a motivation here to give us bad intel, much like they have in the past, much like they did in the lead up to the war beginning February 28th. What if that, just gets Trump to engage again?
No, I'm not worried about the intel. I think that if those New York Times stories are even halfway right, he feels burned by Netanyahu and Mossad coming into the Situation Room and telling him a bunch of lies about, oh, the Iranians can't hit your bases in the Gulf. They can't close the Strait of Hormuz, etc. So that's less likely to be effective. Look, he's defying them, so either they don't have the blackmail or he's not as worried about the blackmail. If that's true, then that's awesome, because if you have Trump unleashed without reservations and they goad him too much, watch out. And that's why the Israelis were opposed to Trump in the first place. Remember, most of the Israel First guys were never Trumpers because he's a wild card because of exactly things like this.
Right.
If they can't control him, they're gonna be in a world of trouble. And so they're in a bit of a panic about that. Now, the smart thing to do would be to, and I hate to say this, but it's true, do what Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin are kind of nudging Israel to do, and I'm sure they have an open line of communication, so they're probably telling them directly as well, right, as they get their talking points on how they should manipulate Americans and etc. But wait till after the election and have everybody get excited. Oh my God, Trump and Vance are standing up for us. They're America first, we knew it. Oh my, finally a politician that stands for us. They surge. The Republicans at least hold off the Democrats, they hold on to power. And then after the election, they go, haha, just kidding. Back to screwing you over, back to helping Israel, back to the war. That would be the smart strategy. Now at that point though, the fury that would unleash would be, I think, uncontrollable, but they don't think that way. They think, no, complete hubris, that there is no amount of distance between us and the sun that's too close. Okay, we're gonna fly right up to it, right? Always more war. But that's also why, Anna, ultimately I think they're not going to have the self-control to wait till November. That's very far from now. Israel also has elections coming up.
That's true, that's true.
I don't think it's gonna be as subtle as intelligence. I don't think they're gonna have the patience for the elections. I think they're just gonna go to a giant war in Lebanon, as big as they can possibly make it. They don't even need a fig leaf that Hezbollah started it, because they'll just have American media lie and say Hezbollah started it, right?
That's true. I'm worried. Look, one of the things that I think Israel is pretty good at is false flags. And I'm worried about them carrying out some sort of attack, blaming it on their enemies, and then again, driving us back into or re-engaging in war, which would be a disaster. And look, you make a point about the political pressures that Netanyahu is facing in Israel, and those political pressures are very much real with these upcoming elections. So I'm gonna read you an excerpt from CNN. We don't have any graphics for this or anything, but I thought this was really interesting, especially since it's reported by CNN. They write that Netanyahu's reticence reflects how central Trump is to his electoral strategy. Months ago, his political team had envisioned a clear arc for the election. A swift victory over Iran, a triumphant visit to the White House in September, a return visit by Trump to Israel in the final stretch, and a flood of presidential imagery sweeping Netanyahu all the way to the polls in October. So this man is pure evil, because he doesn't care about how many innocent lives get lost. By the way, not just Muslim lives, not just Arab lives, but including the lives of American soldiers. For him, this is also a political calculation. It didn't work out the way he was hoping for, but that political strategy really stood out to me.
Yeah, so number one, he assumed that America would be his servant.
Exactly, yeah.
But number two is really important, guys. So Netanyahu, to be fair to him, has been brilliant strategically in manipulating us. There's that old video of him about 25, 30 years ago saying to family or whoever he was in like a living room in Israel, and he says, "Oh, don't worry about America. America's super easy to control and manipulate," right?
Yeah, he did say that.
By the way, if a non-Jewish person said that, there would be a massive trope and they'd be canceled forever. But Netanyahu was like, "Don't worry about it. Easy to manipulate them," and he has. And he's gotten us into endless wars, 7 wars that he requested, $8 trillion, you know it all, right? But now it's possible that he's high on his own supply, because if he thought that's what was gonna happen, that they were gonna beat Iran easily, he apparently is out of touch and his hubris has gotten to him. So what that tells me is, okay, that means he probably thinks that he can still keep going in Lebanon and that it won't be that bad, that he'll be able to drag America back into the war, and even if he doesn't, that he could take on Iran single-handedly. And I don't think that's the case. I think he's gonna have a super rude awakening, at least on the Iran part. Well, what America does, we're not at all sure about, because everyone in Washington, the minute there's any kind of casualties inside Israel, I mean, you'll see them all weeping and weeping on television. We owe Israel, we must help Israel. And then they'll say, what do you mean Israel controls American media?
And if that doesn't work, I really do think they're considering using their nukes. I really do.
Oh, absolutely.
And
No, I don't find that to be a controversial take at all.
Well, they say it. Like, there are people in Israel, and also people here in the United States, like Mark Levin, who not only suggest it, they flat out say it.
No, I have North Korea at second most likely to use a nuke. I have Israel as landslide, runaway winner for most likely to use a nuke. North Korea would use it in a second if it was attacked, full scale attack by us, South Korea or whatever. Israel, if it lost like 11 guys, it'd be like nuke, 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 nuke. Of course, I'm exaggerating there, and they lost plenty of people on October 7th, but they use that as an excuse to conquer Gaza, which now they call it, they're saying we conquered Gaza.
Yep.
So they forgot that they were using self-defense as an excuse. So the minute that they feel slight danger in Israel,
yep,
they wouldn't hesitate to use a nuke. They have no boundaries, and remember, they don't consider Muslims human.
They don't consider pretty much anyone human.
So, and if you're outraged by that and you're a Jewish American, brother, you got to get this through your head. We're not talking about you. Jewish Americans are totally different. Jews across the world are different. But when you get to hardcore religious fundamentalists like Ben Gvir and Smotrich, and yes, Netanyahu, I don't know if he's a religious fundamentalist or just a nationalist fundamentalist, but he's definitely a fundamentalist.
Totally.
They don't view the rest of humanity as worth a single thing. They don't value any other life. He's not gonna have one piece of hesitation, moral hesitation in nuking another country.
I totally agree with you. Well, we should discuss in further detail the Israeli plans to sabotage the MOU, and Lebanon plays a huge role in that. So when we come back, we'll give you the latest statements from the Israelis in regard to their ongoing offensive against Lebanon. We'll be right back.
All right, let's go to Twitch real quick. M Losing 2 says, it's still hard to believe in any of this. No. I've asked myself if it's real like 8 times today. You're totally right. Eliminate political bribes says, looks like Vance is trying to reposition himself 1,000,000,000%.
Yes, that's totally true.
And he's doing it for 2028, but I don't care why he's doing it. I care about results. We'll tackle that problem in a different day. Birdland Dragon says, he seems like he might be worried about pushback. Of course! Since 98% of media and literally 94% of our politicians work for Israel, Of course he's gonna get massive pushback, and he knows that. And every headline is, how dare he? He should kneel, right? And they're furious at him. Doug Paris says, regarding Vance take the win, a stop clock is right twice a day.
Yep.
But hey, if this is one of the 2 times and it's on Israel and anti-war, yes, we got super lucky on that.
But it's been clear that Vance has been against this war from the beginning, and I was unwilling to give him any credit because he wasn't speaking out against it. It could be the case that he was actually a little more brilliant in his strategy, working on this behind the scenes. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit.
You're high today on the
I'm just so excited.
Yeah,
it's a good day in America.
Yeah, no, I don't think he was originally against it. But anyways, look, what matters is what he's doing now.
Yeah.
Scoopster says, truth. Anna is the salt queen. Progress for all says you can't kill your way through international problems. Has someone told Hexit this? Okay, great point. Bloated Ego says words are great, but they only count for about 10%. Action is the other 90%. Yes, of course, no question. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and PN Elson, thanks for joining through the join button below the video on YouTube. We appreciate you guys so much. And then since our members are so funny, I'm going to read one from TYT.com. Paula Jazzle said, Greenland is now asking Trump to invade, hoping to secure a deal similar to the one Iran got. Okay, look, that's funny, but let's get the deal, let's get the peace, right? But you're absolutely right. All right, so now let's go to the next story. So be careful about celebrating too early because Benjamin Netanyahu does have a plan to sabotage this peace deal. So let's tell you about it, and then let's see if we can get past it. Anna, what's the plan?
Well, look, there have been some pretty interesting statements coming from the Prime Minister of Israel. Before we get to it, I want to just refresh everyone's memory in regard to how Lebanon plays a role in securing a real lasting peace deal with Iran. Because Lebanon is a red line for the Iranians, and they have been repeating that again and again. The United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran and their allies in the current war, by signing this MOU, this is the exact wording of the MOU, by the way, declare the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon, and undertake from now on not to initiate any war or any military operation against each other, and to refrain from the threat of use of force against each other, and ensuring the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon. The final deal will confirm the permanent termination of the war on all fronts, including in Lebanon, and other provisions of this paragraph. So I read you the exact wording of the 14-point MOU. So you're not fooled by anyone who is, pro-Israel telling you that Lebanon really has nothing to do with this. Lebanon has a lot to do with securing a final and permanent peace deal. Netanyahu knows that, which is why he insists on the IDF's offensive against Lebanon. Israel doesn't care, they want the war to keep going. So Netanyahu's statements, let's begin with the first thought. Here's what he had to say.
ואתגרים נוספים עוד לפנינו. ואלה דורשים מאיתנו קור רוח, עמידה נחושה על האינטרסים הביטחוניים שלנו, ובד בבד שמירה על הקשר החשוב עם ידידינו האמריקנים שלחמו לצידנו כתף אל כתף, ואנחנו מעריכים זאת מאוד. אנחנו נמשיך לנווט את דרכנו בתבונה ובשיקול דעת. נשמור על הישגי הממשלה, נשמור על הישגי המלחמה. אלה הישגים של עם ישראל כולו. כשם שהחזרנו.
For our audio listeners, let me go ahead and translate that for you. He says that the struggle is not over yet. More challenges still lie ahead. These require us to keep our composure, stand firm on our security interests, and at the same time, maintain the important relationship with our American friends who have stood by us shoulder to shoulder, and we deeply appreciate that. We will continue to exercise judgment and discretion. We will safeguard the government's achievements. We will safeguard the achievements of the war. These are achievements of the entire people of Israel. Later, Netanyahu also says, let's go to graphic 5 here. Just as we restored security and I can't believe he has the audacity to say this. Restored the security and tranquility to the Gaza Strip, which by the way is in ruins right now. So too will we restore security and tranquility to the northern communities, meaning northern Israel. That is how we will live. Maintaining our security zone in southern Lebanon requires that we do not leave as long as Israel's security arrangements are not in place. What he's effectively saying there, in a seemingly diplomatic way, but don't be fooled, is that Israel intends to continue the war against Lebanon and also intends to continue the occupation in southern Lebanon. Further, he says, and this separation distances Hezbollah, he's pretending like this is about Hezbollah, from our citizens and communities. And more broadly, we will continue to hold fast to the supreme goal that has guided us and guided me for most of my adult life, that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. And to those who still have doubts about Israel's resolve, it will not happen. Iran has never had a nuclear weapon. Iran has never indicated that they intend to build nuclear weapons. It's just the fake cover story that keeps getting repeated, even though it is abundantly clear what Israel is actually up to. But Cenk, this is gonna be the final face-off, if you ask me.
Yeah, it is. This is gonna determine everything, what happens in Lebanon. So number one, he's super clear, we're not leaving. And he's said that now half a dozen times. All the cabinet ministers have said it. So that's not in doubt at all. The only people who are pretending that Israel's still doing self-defense in Lebanon is American media. So, like, by the way, if you don't live in America, you know that they invaded Lebanon and they're trying to take that as part of their territory. If you live in America, you don't know that because you heard that they're responding to Hezbollah's attacks against them. No, they've said, and the people who know it the best actually live in Israel because the Israeli press reports all the time their quotes of their politicians saying, yeah, we intend to take southern Lebanon. So when he says we're going to give northern Israel the tranquility we gave Gaza, that's saying we're going to obliterate southern Lebanon and take it so that northern Israel is tranquil because we've now swallowed up southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's not like he was unclear. He then said, we're not leaving, literally, quote, right? And so when he talked about achievements though in Hebrew, I thought that was really interesting because he didn't refer to all the land they've taken as a temporary buffer zone that was necessary for security reasons and self-defense. No, he framed it as achievements. We have taken Gaza, we have taken southern Lebanon. Those are our achievements. We have won them in war. See, at home in Israel, they're barely pretending it has anything to do with self-defense. They're bragging about, we killed them and we took their land because we're stronger than them, which by the way isn't true. America is stronger than them and they've basically robbed and raped America in order to take our military, take trillions of dollars off of us in the wars that we've committed to them. And they brag about, ha ha ha, America's in our back pocket. And that's what it implicitly between the lines in those statements, that's what Netanyahu's doing again. Saying, yeah, Trump says that we have to leave Lebanon. And I'm not going to leave Lebanon. That means I'm stronger than Trump. Israel is stronger than America. And we're gonna bend America to our will. And so when we stay in Lebanon, he knows, now this is my analysis, that it'll get worse. And when it gets worse, that's when they already have their crying game strategy ready, right? And they're gonna come to America and they're gonna cry all over television and all their politicians are gonna cry and they're gonna say, America owes us. And all of American media is gonna say in unison that we owe them. And our politicians are gonna say that, then is that going to work? Are they gonna be able to drag us back into the war? Now, if they do, then MAGA gets the end of crying game and surprise, still working for Israel. And here's what you gotta do next, okay? So if it doesn't work, Well, then that's a whole new world where Israel is in a war without us against a pretty powerful country in Iran. Could Israel be in a little bit of trouble?
They're in a lot of trouble, Cenk. I mean, look, at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge that President Trump had no other choice. Even if he wanted to stay in the war against Iran, we were running out of interceptors, much like Israel is running out of interceptors. But Netanyahu and the current Israeli government is unhinged, irrational. And it is terrifying that an irrational actor on the international stage is in possession of nukes, but that is the case. So that's why I keep going back to the nuclear option, because they know it's not like they don't know they're running out of interceptors. It's not like they don't know the math in this entire scenario. Even the United States doesn't have enough missile interceptors to keep this war going and protect Israel as it keeps going. But Israel wants it to move forward. They want to move forward with the war. What happens when you guys run out of missile interceptors? Is that when you're gonna rely on the nukes? That's why I'm concerned here, Cenk.
Yeah. So there's two disaster scenarios. I'm not sure there is a good scenario. So I'm gonna get to that in a second. But on TYT.com, we have a poll that I'm curious about your take on it. Will Netanyahu be able to get US politicians and media to side with him over Trump? So initially, of course he will. That's not a question, right? But if Trump draws the line and says, no, we're not continuing the war, will the media and politicians all go to Israel's side and Netanyahu's side and demand that Trump return the war, including Democrats? That's gonna be interesting because Democrats were pretending to be against the war, but when the rubber hits the road now and AIPAC grabs them by the ear and says, now get back in there and give me more war, my guess is that a huge percentage of the Democratic Party will try to help them.
I mean, what is Josh Gottheimer up to today? He's
God,
going
he must
after
be
Hassan,
weeping.
comparing him to Nick Fuentes. Like, that's what he's spending his time doing. It's ridiculous. I mean, that's a Democratic lawmaker who I think has shown us what his real priorities are. But in regard to the operations that Israel is continuing to carry out in Lebanon, I want to just show you what Courtney Bonneau, who's a journalist on the ground in Lebanon, shared with us all today. She shared a video and captioned it with, "The Israeli army today dropped white phosphorus bombs on Nabatea."
Of course they did, because they're terrorists. That's, like Anna, you say to me sometimes, and a lot of folks on social media say it too, like, Cenk, stop bothering to say that national media is working on behalf of Israel. We all know that. That's like super obvious, right? Every time Israel needs something, all of national media is like, help Israel, you stupid Americans, right? So, and this is another one of those things. No, the Israeli government is a bunch of terrorists. They don't care about the lives of anyone. They stole all of our technology and built up weapons of mass destruction. They use white phosphorus regularly. They do double taps. They're terrorists. They're a giant terrorist state. So that's a huge problem for the country, which leads me to my two disaster scenarios. So look, today's a great day because it looks like both in terms of signing the peace deal or the memorandum of understanding, the beginning of peace, and in the rhetoric that Trump and Vance are using against Israel, it looks like America's headed back towards sovereignty, which would be the most amazing thing, right? But as we're all excited about that, remember two things. So I guarantee it, you could write it down in stone. Israel is going to hit Lebanon so hard that it's going to get a response from Iran, because it's designed to get a response from Iran.
Totally.
To try to drag America back into the war. So one scenario is they succeed and oh my God, we're back into this stupid war and more people are dying and it's the disaster all over. Or the war keeps going and Israel starts to run out of interceptor missiles and we can't produce them fast enough, even if we wanted to, which we certainly do, right? We would give them endless, we would give them our entire inventory, right? But we're running out, they're running out. So if they start to lose this war, the Israelis have no conscience, certainly their government. Population's barely different at this point, but so yeah, I think that there's unfortunately a very high chance they might use a nuke.
In fact, Netanyahu is facing a lot of pressure from the Israeli population in regard to going harder against Lebanon. So, to your point, this unfortunately has, the issue spans beyond the Israeli government at this point. The Israeli government is facing pressure from their people to go harder.
Okay, whether I like it or not, I want to be clear. Like, if Israel uses a nuke and our son of a bitch politicians support them, we might have January 6th on a different level.
I agree.
Like, the American people are sick of this disgusting immorality. So it's one thing to get us to pay for a genocide, which is a moral stain on us that we can't get off. If you want us to pay for a Holocaust, no.
We stormed the Capitol.
Yeah, I mean, that's not gonna stand.
It's beyond immoral and it's disgusting. So we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, we're gonna keep track of all the developments, but let's just celebrate the fact that at least for today, good things are happening. Why don't we move on to our next story, because I've been curious about how Sean Hannity has been responding or reacting to all of this. Hannity, of course, is a big-time Zionist. Let's take a look.
Now, I had a conversation with the president. I've talked to Steve Witkoff. I've talked to others in the administration. There is so much more under the surface that has already been discussed in deep detail surrounding Iran and this working agreement. I see many people reacting to the memorandum itself that are completely ignoring those words of Donald Trump, that he has no problem at all, he said it to me directly, going back and bombing anytime he wants. And the guy, by the way, that wrote The Art of the Deal, well, he's been pretty clear where the red lines are. There's no ambiguity here. To me, his words are far more impactful than any memorandum if you want to know what is in the president's head and what he's thinking. But anyway, he's a trust but verify guy anyway. So at the end of the day, if Iran doesn't comply, they have been told 3 times in 2 days what is to come, and it's not reconstruction. It's not one American taxpayer dollar. It's not sanctions relief that will, that their country desperately needs, and hell will rain down from the sky. Who do you want to believe?
Yeah, you saw joy in his eyes as he talked about hell raining down from the sky. These guys love death and destruction and massacres, of course. But there's 2 possibilities based on what Hannity's saying there. One is that Hannity's full of crap, and I know you're thinking, option A. And he's saying, oh, Trump has a secret plan. He had no secret plan. But option B is really possible, which is that Hannity knows something about Trump's intentions that we don't know, which is to get us back into the war later.
Oh, that's such a devastating point.
Yeah, so, okay, let's give you more details about what Hannity knows and doesn't know, and then we'll discuss that.
Hold on, I gotta get over the devastation for a second. Okay, I think that was an incredible point that I wish I thought of myself. I think you're right, but anyway, so Hannity, in my view, before Cenk made that devastating point, was he's got to choose between his love of Israel or his daddy Trump, right? Like, you have to side with one or the other in this scenario where Trump wants to move toward peace, wants to end the war against Iran. And I thought he's siding with Trump. He likes Papa Trump more. He wants to still be in Trump's good graces. But I also want to just quickly say, make no mistake about it, whether you're talking about the Democratic establishment or the Republican establishment, they want the war to keep going. I give you Senator Adam Schiff, who says, wow, Iran gets sanctions relief, the release of frozen funds, by the way, that's their money, the ability to export oil, which by the way helps the global economy and lowers gas prices, and a $300 billion reconstruction fund. The US gets a reiteration of the vague promise Iran won't develop a nuke. It's not vague. It's not vague. It wasn't vague when it was under a deal that Obama negotiated, the JCPOA. It's not vague. They are open to people coming into their country to check and make sure they're not building a nuclear weapon. Okay, but that was Adam Schiff, a Democrat. Then you move forward to Republicans like Ted Cruz. He says, What has been released so far suggests that, unfortunately, the president is getting, I think, very poor advice when it comes to this deal. Under the terms of what's been released, somewhere between $10 billion and $30 billion will flow to the Ayatollah immediately before they make even a single nuclear concession. Now, Hannity doesn't give a damn what Democrats have to say, but he is seeing the backlash Trump is facing from Republican lawmakers. And that is what he's responding to in the segment that he did. So with that in mind, even though Hannity himself is a big Zionist, it seems like he's siding with Trump here. He claims after speaking with Steve Witkoff, he realized that the deal is far more nuanced than the general public know about. Take a look.
That it is so much deeper than that term sheet. It is so different. And then there's other pressure. JD Vance was on some show saying that that there was a lot of pressure just to get something on paper so that all these discussions, they didn't want to have it out in public because there still are factions that are competing for power within the Iranian regime.
You're so right, Cenk. I'm worried now.
Yeah. So let's go back to Adam Schiff for a second. So he says this is an outrageous, terrible deal. It's surrender, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, don't you want peace? So, okay, so you don't want peace. And that's why you're saying that it's a capitulation. If you wanted peace, you wouldn't say, oh, the peace deal is a capitulation. That's obvious. So we told you Adam Schiff was a liar. We told you most of the Democrats pretending to be in favor of peace were liars and actually wanted a war for Israel. So thank you for proving us right. Second of all, other than the $300 billion that we're not paying, the Gulf countries are, this is nearly identical to Obama's deal.
It sure is.
And remember, Adam Schiff was pretending to be in favor of Obama's deal. But remember, a lot of the Democrats were never in favor of Obama's deal. There was actually you guys might not remember this, but we've been on the air forever. There was a huge internal fight within Democrats when Obama made that deal.
Yes.
Because a lot of the Democrats work for Israel and they didn't want peace. They wanted an excuse to attack Iran.
Important context, Cenk is 100% right. In fact, after the deal was secured by the Obama administration, Benjamin Netanyahu was furious and he shows up to the United States to address Congress and basically excoriate Obama for this deal. And a bunch of Democratic lawmakers showed up to the speech.
Yeah.
I mean, you should boycott that speech, but they're like, no, we respect Benjamin Netanyahu. He's got important things to say. We're gonna show up as he's trashing our president.
No. Huge numbers of Democrats have shown up to speech after speech of Netanyahu in Congress, including when he was slapping the Democratic president around and standing ovations.
Yes.
Bravo to our real leader. Where's our check? Where's our check? Real leader. We love Israel way more than America, right? So here they are again. By the way, Chris Murphy's on here. He's supposed to be one of the best senators on the left. And he's like, oh, this is a terrible deal, right? Okay, I didn't see you get this animated about the war. Now all of a sudden there's a potential for peace and all the Democrats are all over television fighting against peace. So, all right, now in terms of Witkoff, so if Trump and Vance had not said those really harsh words against Israel, which we talked about earlier in the show, about who are you to stand up to us, you're a tiny little country, no, we're not gonna turn Iran into Libya, and all those things that they said, I would have been way more worried. Because if they were still mealy-mouthed about it and they're like, oh, we have signed a memorandum of understanding. And then Hannity goes on air, he's like, I talked to Witkoff, it's cool, don't worry. Yeah, because Hannity works for Murdoch and Murdoch works for Israel.
100%.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay, the only thing that Hannity would rather lick than Trump's boots is Netanyahu's boots. So that's his big, he's got two daddies but Netanyahu's the biggest one of those. So then I would have been super worried. But since Trump and Vance are also saying super harsh things against Israel, and it's real enough that all the Israel first guys are livid at Vance, and as a proxy to being livid at Trump, and they could barely contain themselves against Trump, right? That's what's leading me to believe that the peace deal is real. So maybe it is option one of Hannity just covering Trump's ass, plus maybe believing, because he wants to believe, oh, no, well, I'm sure we'll get back into the war.
Maybe, maybe he's justifying everything to himself and telling himself pretty little stories so he doesn't flip out. But
please no peace is how he goes to sleep.
Yeah, but seriously, I mean, maybe not those exact words, but that's effectively what he's pushing for. Now, Hannity's explanation as to what brought Iran to the negotiating table was interesting. So let's take a look at what he had to say.
Obviously, Midnight Hammer, Epic Fury were historic in so many different ways. And obviously that has had a massive impact on Iran. The blockade is the single most other effective thing that the president put in place. Their entire economy, 90% of it, is an energy oil-based economy.
But final video for you. What Hannity's reasoning is here in regard to what actually motivated the deal is, in my opinion, laughable, but I'm curious what you think, Cenk. Take a look.
After the president resumed those 2 big bombings last week, it got the Iranians' attention. And when he said the next night is going to be harder than the previous 2 nights, and he's probably taking Karg Island, then all behind the scenes, I am told that all hell broke loose. And that all the Iranians, and JD confirmed this to me, I have no reason to doubt him, that for the first time in 47 years, there is direct communication with the Iranian leadership, and that had apparently never happened before. And they were begging to sign a sheet and get their signature on a piece of paper. And that quote was the memorandum of understanding.
I am so curious how people are responding to that segment with Sean Hannity, because it seems like he's trying to support the MOU and calm everyone down, which will lead to fury and rage.
Yeah, and curious to see what he says the next night, because look, I don't know why Rupert Murdoch is the world's biggest Zionist, but he is. And my entire life, Murdoch has paid all the Fox News anchors unbelievable amounts of money to do Israeli propaganda. New York Post that he owns, nonstop Israeli propaganda. Whenever there's a chance for war, New York Post is like, yeah. Wall Street Journal editorial section, the British papers he owns, always for war, always for Israel, always against peace, always against America. No, you must follow Israel like a dog. So if they have some like 80-year-old blackmail on him or whatever it is, I don't know what it is, but Murdoch will definitely always be for Israel. That is an immovable object. So if Hannity gets the sense that Witkoff was, BSing him, then he might come back on the air a day or 2 later and go, oh, I'm so sorry, Master Netanyahu, Master Murdoch. Of course, this is terrible. I can't believe Trump has been deluded by some of his advisors into going in the wrong direction, blah, 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 right? So, but the last comments he made there are hilarious, that the Iranians were begging for peace. No. No other sources reporting that at all, not even close. In fact, the hardliners in Iran are super mad that they're going towards peace. They've got their own neocons and they're like, what are you doing? We have them on the ropes. We got the strait closed, they can't open it. The world markets are gonna crash. We're gonna be the most powerful nation on earth when that happens. Who cares if they, can they take Karg Island? They probably can. It's not who cares, of course, there's a lot of money on the line there, but they've already built that into their assumptions, right? And so they're like, and they're running out of interceptor missiles. Let's keep hitting them, let's keep going. And in fact, Jeremy Scahill is reporting at Dropsite News that the Iranians hired a psychologist because they think that Trump might be mentally ill. And so they're like, how do you negotiate with someone who has mental health problems? And they've been analyzing it. So the idea that they're like, oh, Trump is too tough. He is so smart and savvy. We cannot keep up. Let's surrender. Surrender and get $300 billion? No, come on.
My mind wanders back to that NBC News interview featuring Foreign Minister Arakchi, where he's asked, are you worried about US troops on the ground? And he smirks and says, no, we are waiting for them. There was no military option. I think that's abundantly clear. All right, we gotta take our final break. We'll be right back.
All right, let's go to Super Chat. Rose Orozco, we really appreciate you so much. Every once in a while, she gives like $3 or gifts a membership and stuff. I love you for that. Whatever folks can do is so appreciated. It's like the price of a coffee and giving to us so we can stay in business. Again, deeply appreciated. James Kelly says, I agree they would use a nuke. My fear is that I wouldn't use that on us. Also, did you guys hear about the Peter Thiel Club? My governor is a part of it. No, I have not heard about the Peter Thiel Club, so I'm gonna check that out, and I'm already bracing for impact. No, the Israel wouldn't use a nuke on us. Nobody's that mental. On Iran, yeah, they are that mental. Throbbing at 37 Pakistani American, the treaty is like a subscription service. You get 60 days of ceasefire. If you like it, you can renew. If you don't, well, Trump said if Iran doesn't behave, he'll probably go back to, continuing the order of the expulsionists. That's not diplomacy, that's a return policy with a chance of World War III. Anna looking good. Purple-fessional. Okay, that's a new fun made up word. And then YouTube members, Silver says, Israelis laugh at words. You have to use force and or take away their wealth. They will always call your bluff and take things further than civilized people would. Truth. Abby Normal says, these congressmen are why we can't break from Israel. And I'm out of time, we'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. And Asimov Prophet is one of our members on TYT.com. He says, Anna's a movie star.
Come on, guys.
No. He's referring to the Alec Baldwin interview where they said you were in the movie Baristas and versus Billionaires.
I didn't want to brag, but it turns out I am in fact a movie star.
There you go. All right, become one of our members at TYT.com/join. Anna, what's next?
All right, we're gonna switch it up. This is an entirely different topic, but I'm happy about it, so I want to share it with you. Actually, Cenk, why don't you start?
Yeah. So the Supreme Court did something that might get Anna and I to debate. They've decided that they're gonna let you smoke weed while you have guns. Is that a good idea? I don't know, let's find out, Anna.
Well, actually, let me ask you, Cenk. As someone, a bit of a connoisseur yourself.
I don't know that I go to connoisseur.
Would you ever be concerned that your use of the devil's lettuce would make you an irresponsible gun owner?
No, look, there's some chance that the Supreme Court actually might have landed in the right spot.
They sure did.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying. I certainly don't think that, hey, if you had a joint or you did an edible or two, that you should have some of your rights taken away, including your gun rights. Now, I don't really believe in gun rights to begin with, so I'm kind of in a weird spot.
Whereas I do.
Yeah, whereas Anna does. So let's tell you where the Supreme Court landed, and then we'll decide if it's the right place or not.
Okay, perfect. Now, if you guys can remember, Hunter Biden was attacked by the Republican Party, by political opponents, because he had lied on a form as he was attempting to obtain a weapon, a gun. And there were laws that prevented people who use drugs from being able to legally purchase firearms. Well, that whole issue came before the Supreme Court, not in regard to Hunter Biden, but in regard to another individual. So as is reported by the Washington Post, this case involved a Texas man by the name of Ali Hamani, whose lawyers argued that their client's Second Amendment rights were violated because it turns out that he is also a connoisseur of marijuana. He admitted to using cannabis or pot every other day, but he also was in possession of firearms. So back in 2022, authorities found him in possession of both marijuana and a Glock, a 9mm to be exact. And so this case was rejected by the lower courts, but it made its way to the Supreme Court. And in a unanimous decision, the justices found that the law's habitual user provision was inconsistent with the Constitution's right to bear arms. And here's what they say. We appreciate that drugs and guns can sometimes make for a dangerous mix, Justice Neil Gorsuch wrote in the majority's opinion. But Gorsuch wrote that the law could not be squared with the court's strict standard that firearm restrictions must be rooted in the nation's tradition. Gorsuch also elaborated on the decision further by saying, by their own terms, laws like these did not seek to protect the public from violence so much as to protect habitual drunkards from themselves and their families from financial devastation. Gorsuch also acknowledges the obvious pitfalls of the decision, saying that, quote, we appreciate that drugs and guns can sometimes make for a dangerous mix. So here's what I am actually a little bit worried about. It depends on the drug, right? So if you're talking about marijuana, marijuana doesn't make you violent, okay? Marijuana doesn't lead you to act impulsively. There are drugs that do though. And so does this ruling extend to all drugs or is it narrow and only applies to marijuana?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It seems like they're talking about marijuana, and it'll be interesting to see how the lower courts interpret it when it comes to other drugs. And then how do they make a decision? Is cocaine okay, but fentanyl isn't, right?
Right.
So, okay, now to me, there are two super important carve outs here. One is if you're basically an addict, a habitual user, so then we're more worried about what you will do, with a gun in your house and under those circumstances. Number two is you obviously can't use the gun while you're intoxicated, whether it's alcohol or marijuana. So you need those, obviously. Otherwise, I'm on fentanyl, but it's okay if I walk around with an AK. No, it's not. Even if it's not fentanyl, I'm on a tremendous amount of drugs in marijuana. And by the way, enough levels, you could hallucinate a little bit, right?
That's true, yeah.
Right, and so we can't have that. Now, look, I don't really believe the Second Amendment says you have almost an unconditional right to guns. I think it says you have to be part of a militia. I don't think that's in the text. It's obvious, but people say it's not obvious. No, that we're all somehow in a militia, or that it's not important even though it's in the language. But okay, I've lost that battle. So
citizens have a right to defend themselves, Jake.
Well, yeah. So I hear you, and so certainly I'm not going to win that battle over the Second Amendment probably in my lifetime. We can have reasonable gun control, and certainly if you're high, it's reasonable gun control to say you can't use a gun now. But if you say, hey, someone smoked a joint, so they should never be able to own a gun, in the context of having gun rights, that'd be crazy.
I agree.
Right? Like if you said, hey, we shouldn't have the kind of extreme gun rights we have now, we should have better gun control so less of us die, man, I would agree with you totally, right? But that's not the situation we're in.
That's right.
And in this situation, if you say to Hunter Biden, or by the way, 15% of the country that smokes marijuana at least once a month, or 5% of the country that turns out does some sort of marijuana every day, 5% of the country. Every day.
I can't believe it's that low, to be honest with you. So let me go to graphic 7. In a 2024 government survey, more than 15% of Americans ages 12, that's way too young, 12 or older reported having used marijuana in the past month. More than 17 million people reported using the drug on a nearly daily basis. And that, again, was a study published in 2024. And one other thing that I wanted to bring up is Ali Hamani, who was the person, challenging these rules or these laws, was represented by the American Civil Liberties Union. So the ACLU defending Americans' rights to own a weapon even if they use marijuana, and I will allow it.
Yeah, so that's not surprising that the ACLU would do that. And they sometimes take very extreme positions in what they view as freedom, including defending money in politics, which is absurd.
I disagree, yeah, I disagree with them on that.
But in this case, it makes sense that they're on that side. Ultimately, it turns out I do agree with Anna. So let Hunter Biden go.
Yes.
Okay, it was an absurd thing. Earlier in your life you smoked, well, not just marijuana in this case to be fair, like super heavy drugs, but you lied about it for on the form. And hence we're gonna take your gun away. You take away, well, at least 15% of the country's guns. And I know that the right wing doesn't want that. Okay, And apparently some on the left don't either. Okay, now for the network continues. So when we come back, the guy running against the worst Democrat in the country, that's how it's being labeled. And then a little bit after that, Jim Acosta joins us. How does he view CNN and current events today, given that he's outside of CNN now? So we'll be right back. All right, back on TYT. Want to thank a new member, Beat Chichkin. Thanks for hitting that beautiful join button below the video on YouTube. We appreciate you. All right, guys. So I want to read some of your comments and respond and talk about how today was a good day for the revolution, political revolution, standing up to Israel. What a gorgeous day. Okay, not sure that I would have thought that any of our politicians would have done that in my lifetime. Found some ironic folks to do it, but we're gonna come back to that because I've got a great interview for you guys. So joining us now is Captain Bobby Lepin. He's running in Maryland State Senate District 46. Why are we talking to someone running for a state Senate position? Because he's running against someone described as the worst Democrat in the country. So that's fascinating. So Bobby, welcome.
It's good to be here.
All right, good to have you. So why is Bill Ferguson the most hated Democrat in America?
Well, he was the only Democrat from a Democratic state that used his power as the Senate President of Maryland to stop mid-cycle redistricting. We could have added an additional Democrat to Congress from Maryland, but he stood in the way. The only Democrat from a Democratic state in the entire country. And now look what is happening.
So talk to me about why you think he did it. Well, I'm sure that he will say it's out of principle. Why do you think he went in that direction?
Well, he didn't say principle. His story that he kept trying to deliver to folks is that he was fearful that it might backfire and we might actually lose a Democrat. But what is interesting is I've been running this race against him for the past 6 months. And now that we're winning in a poll, the working people rising up, are winning in this poll and we're coming close 5 days to the election. Now he's flip-flopping and he promises that he's going to call a special session and redistrict right after the primary. How convenient, right after the primary. Yeah. This is just what working people are so tired of in this country. They're tired of the politicians that say one thing and do another. I'm a working person. I'm like a Bernie Democrat. I'm not taking any corporate money. I'm not taking any developer money. I've been out here talking about, how money should be spent on the working people, that Democrats, to be a good Democrat, you must do everything in your power to stand up to Donald Trump, 10 toes in the ground, face to face. And I'm going against a guy who is literally a Chuck Schumer of Maryland. And he spent more than $1 million trying to beat me in this race. And still, we're a couple of points ahead of him in the polls, which is just, power to the people.
Yeah. Look, it's a new day in America when a candidate can say as a pejorative that his opponent is Chuck Schumer of Maryland and you're winning, right? Like until this election cycle, that never would have happened because the media would have then, tore your head off and said that you're disloyal to the Democratic Party, and then you would, and they would have just consumed you, right? So obviously we're in a different time, and to your point, you're an Army veteran, a former Baltimore school teacher, a volunteer firefighter, and a charter boat business owner. I don't know if you've got to be involved with the water somehow to be a populist left-wing figure these days with you and Graham Plattner with the oysters. But
we're both small boat captains, that's for sure, and both working people trying to save democracy. Same old everyday stuff.
Yeah.
Can I make a quick point, because I've done a lot of these shows and people say it's so weird that I'm bringing on a state candidate. And I feel like I used to be a former school teacher. I was a government teacher, and I feel like I just need to put in a little thing in there about why it's important to know who your state representatives are. When women lost the right to choose in this country, it wasn't the federal government that went state by state taking it away. It was state legislatures. In Kansas, when trans folks were forced to out themselves on their driver's license or go to jail, it wasn't the federal government that did that. It was state legislatures. And even with redistricting, whether it be, Texas or Maryland or whatever state, this mid-cycle redistricting, this fight between good and evil is state legislatures, not the federal government. And a lot of people take that for granted. It's so important that we win back Congress, but it's also so very important that people in their own states, in their own city councils, whatever it may be, that if we want a better Democratic Party, we have to elect better Democrats from the local level to the state level, all the way to the federal level.
So Bobby,
just, quick little thing there.
No, that's important. I actually wanted to ask you about that next. So to your point about how important the states are, Maryland is the state where Wolfpack, which is a group to get money out of politics, tried really hard, got really close, but we couldn't get over the top because Democrats started bailing on us on the idea of calling for a convention to call for an amendment to get money out of politics. And, and Nancy Pelosi's and the Chuck Schumers of the world did a lot of fear mongering and said, oh no, a convention is too scary. That would be too much change. No, we need a lot of change to get money out of politics. We can't do it without an amendment. So if you win here, can we count on you to vote to try to have the states get around Washington and call for an amendment to get money out of politics?
100%, 100%. It is what's killing us. The wealth gap is the largest it's ever been in this country. We are definitely living in a gilded age. And a gilded age brings upon fascists like our president in DC right now. If we want to move past this, the very first thing people have to do is they have to elect better Democrats who are actually going to fight to keep corporate money out of politics, because it's not going to happen overnight. And then once all those Democrats get elected, they must do everything in their power to try to bring government back to the people. They have to do everything in their power to make life more affordable for the people. No more of this Wall Street and the Dow is so high. We need to talk about Main Street. We need to talk about families. We need to talk about, what people love about their communities, which is the people. It's not Wall Street or all these big, huge things that everyone's trying to push into our faces as the important stuff. What's important is equality. It's people feeling safe in their own homes, in their own communities, not having mass ICE agents running the streets, not having the military occupying American cities. As a veteran, I'm looking at this country and we're losing our democracy and our freedom. And I'm literally running against a guy who's part of that problem. And I do wish that anyone watching this in Baltimore, or if you're in Maryland, if you're in Baltimore, I need you to vote for me. The election's in 5 days, June 23rd. If you're in Maryland, I need you to come down and volunteer if you have time to knock doors with me. And if you're not, if you're just someplace else and you want a working class guy, a working class progressive to beat this multi-million-dollar corporate-backed, Chuck Schumer, I need people to chip in $5, $35, whatever it is they can, so we can actually get this ball across the goal line and win this race in 5 days. If I could pitch my website, it's makegoodchange.com. Makegoodchange.com.
Well, look at that. We had that ready.
Great. Yeah, great. Thanks for the pitch. I appreciate it.
No problem. And we always have the link in the description box afterwards. So, Bobby, you mentioned two things there that I wanted to build on too. So, one is how you've now taken the lead, which I'm positive wouldn't have happened in the old days if you, because corporate media would have buried you, right? But it looks like what happened instead, and which might be a sign of the times that are more impactful than just your race, although of course your race is really important, especially because it's the linchpin in Maryland for whether you guys take action or not in fighting against Trump. But in your experience, has online media been strong enough now to propel a candidate like you past corporate media and into the lead?
Yeah, it has. In fact, if it wasn't for folks like you and Brian Tyler Cohen, so many folks that are out there, even my own platform, Make Good Change, which is Instagram and TikTok, we get about 2 million views per month. If it wasn't for the social media, for the YouTube folks, for the online presence, it would be just like any other election where the working person gets squashed and the person with $1 million wins. Because I have been on so many national podcasts, it has forced like the Washington Post and the New York Times and even our local media to actually follow this race. And it's an important race. And once they started following it, people were like, wow, this is really interesting. I mean, it really is the sign of the times. Years ago, if I told people in 2016, when I first heard of Bernie Sanders and the first politician I ever gave money to, the first politician I thought actually heard me and understood me, as a working person, understood my struggles and was going to fight for me. I could not tell you from 2016, 10 years later to today, that when I go door to door to someone, and they say, I haven't heard the two candidates. What's the big picture? And I say, I'm a Bernie Sanders running against a Chuck Schumer. And people say less. I got your back. I'll vote for you on Tuesday. It's amazing the shift that is happening in this world. And it's amazing the shift that social media has to play in it, whether good or bad. Like there's folks out there like you and like me and like Brian and like, a Cat Ladies for America, all these other, folks who are out there trying to spread the good news and, fight the evil with good and trying to have our message so loud, despite what the algorithm does, despite what Meta tries to do or what TikTok tries to do to silence us. But since so many people, 72% of Americans are on social media at least once per week, it's important that folks like you and I, folks, who are out there trying to fight the good fight, that we have our voices heard, because our voices truly are the voices of the worker. It's truly are the voices of those who simply want to feel safe in their own home and feel safe from fascism. It's big, and I really do. I hope everyone that watches this, because I watch your show and it's like you feel like this person. You are a celebrity. You're a big name dude. But I want everyone to know how important it is that folks like you exist out here. And if you're watching this right now, just, do a thumbs up, give some love to this channel, because, without the audience, there is no you. And without you, there might not be a democracy.
Okay, I don't know about the second part. You're very kind for saying that, but you're definitely right about the first part. And so I appreciate that. And look, it's a beautiful new world. And remember, we're peaking, and corporate media is waning. So hopefully in 2028, the impact's even larger. And then on it goes. We hope.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So, Bobby, one last question for you. So we know he voted the wrong way on redistricting, but he's got you said he spent $1 million on a state race. That means he's loaded. That means he's probably taking a lot of PAC money. So has he done anything else that's problematic, data centers or anything along those lines?
Yeah, all the stuff, everything that a progressive would be against. In 22, he used his power as Senate president to hold up a constitutional amendment in Maryland that would protect reproductive rights. The National Organization for Women, Reproductive Justice Maryland begged him to pass this amendment, to bring it up for a vote in the Senate. And he said it wasn't needed. And then 2 months later, Roe v. Wade was overturned. The National Organization for Women endorsed my race. Reproductive Justice Maryland Action has endorsed my race simply because, I mean, that's an unforgivable. It's an unforgivable thing. At the very minimum, as a Democrat, you must protect women and the right to choose in this country. That is Democrat 101. That is old school stuff, you know? And then, moving on with ICE, for 5 years, 130 nonprofit organizations and civil rights organizations asked him to end 287G agreements in Maryland. If people don't know, a 287G agreement is an official agreement between a state and local government and ICE. It basically deputizes local law enforcement to act as ICE officers, where they have access to ICE databases. So if your neighbor, your wonderful neighbor that you have cookouts with or whatever, but just happens to be undocumented, if they might not come to a complete stop at a stop sign, and an officer who has a 287G agreement or protected under a 287G pulls them over and believes they're undocumented, they can run their name through a system. And if they come up in the ICE database, they can hold this person without a charge in America, without a charge for 48 hours while ICE comes to pick them up. Hundreds of Maryland families were split up because of these 287G agreements. And 5 years, for 5 years, the person I'm running against used his power as Senate president to not even allow it to come up for a vote on the Senate floor until an election year. These things are just unforgivable. They're just unforgivable. And then you just add on top of that he takes, $25,000 from utility companies when people are hurting, $25,000 every single year from, health insurance companies when people are struggling. It's just the epitome of what the Democratic Party is trying to move away from. The epitome of what the Democratic Party no longer needs. These corporate establishment, insiders that no longer do the will of the people or even hear the people,
Yeah,
it's cowardly. It's cowardly.
God, I love to see populism coming from the left. It's beautiful. Okay. All right, Captain Bobby LePin, running in Maryland State Senate District 46. Website is makegoodchange.com. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us and good luck.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, all right. Love it. Look at the changes in the air in the country. God, today was positive. All right, so let me read some of your comments from the show and react to them. Look, guys, in terms of, the point of this show is to crowdsource a revolution. And now, we've had all these different candidates that come on and half of them have won. Some of them are going to Congress. Chris Rabb's going to Congress. Dr. Hamawiy's going to Congress. And they're gonna vote for you guys. They're not gonna vote for the donors. They don't have any corporate donors. They're not gonna vote for foreign governments. Foreign governments hate them. So that's populism from the left. That's real change. And we've talked to libertarians. We've talked to people on the right who want real change, who want to get money out of politics. I'll tell you, the most encouraging development that we have had in the midst of all of this is not just the beginnings of getting our sovereignty back from Israel. It's actually the beginnings of getting our sovereignty back from the entire donor class. And now I see all the right-wingers, let alone all the independents, saying, hell yeah, get money out of politics. Where's the question? Because remember, the only reason why the Republicans opposed us in the past on that was because they used to watch Fox News and all the other Murdoch-owned properties. And they got brainwashed into, billionaires buying our politicians is a great idea. Oil companies and defense contractors and foreign governments buying our politicians with unlimited money in politics is a great idea. And so it used to be so frustrating to fight against those zombies. But now so many of the zombies have been liberated and they're not zombies anymore. They're back to planet Earth and joining the fight. And even back then, we still had overwhelming numbers. Over 90% of this country wants to get money out of politics. The only sons of bitches who don't are all in Washington. They're all on television, they're all in Congress going, no, we love, and what I can't stand is the corporate Democrats lying through their teeth 24/7 about, oh, I would like to get money out of politics. And then somebody in the New York Times will write an opinion piece. Oh my God, that Democrat is so amazing. They said empty words about getting money out of politics. Hey, did they propose anything? No. Are they gonna take any action? No. Then what's the point? I would like to get your vote by tricking you into saying that I'm in favor of the thing you're in favor of, but I plan to do nothing. Hey, New York Times, write a positive piece and don't tell anyone that I'm not gonna do anything. Well, now there's people like Ro Khanna who are saying, yeah, let's go and do something. Let's pass an amendment. Now there's guys like Bobby Le Pen at the state level going, send me the bill. We'll do it. We'll do an end run around Washington. Guys, if you don't know that, the answer is right there, okay? It's in the Constitution already. It says there's two things about how to get an amendment. One is you have to propose it, and the other is that you have to ratify it. In terms of proposing it, everybody goes, oh, you need 2/3 of Congress. No, you don't. There's a second path. If 2/3 of the states call for a convention, an Article 5 convention, at the convention, you can propose an amendment. If you hear anyone telling you that they can pass an amendment in a convention, they're flat out lying to you. And I see some people on the left doing that and it drives me crazy. I don't know why they purposely, and some of them purposely lie about that. And I guess that they got so bought into the demagoguery from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. And they're like, oh my God, they told us we can't have a convention. We can't have it. Oh my God, what if the Republicans took over a convention? The Republicans took over Congress. The Republicans took over the White House. Money in politics has taken over everything. And you want to cut off our one avenue to rescue us? Hell no. But now the populace, I think, can actually overrun them with guys like Bobby. And then at the Senate level, you're gonna have, I hope, guys like Graham Plattner in there. And if you tell Graham Plattner, no, you have to bow your head to Chuck Schumer, because Chuck's been so good to you, right? Okay, and all the corporate Democrats, they've been so good. They tried to help you win in Maine, didn't they? Oh, right, no. The corporate Democrats literally tried to get Susan Collins the victory. They're doing it right now. So it's a tactical mistake because that unleashes the Plattners of the world to, when they get in the Senate, to push for our priorities. So if 2/3 of Congress wants to propose an amendment, great. But if it takes 2/3 of the states to propose an amendment, great. No problem at all with that. And then you need 3/4 of the states to ratify, which is incredibly difficult. That's why you can't get a right-wing amendment to pass and you can't get a purely left-wing amendment to pass, because there's way more than 13 blue states and 13 red states. So we need a unified country. Good news on money and politics, we're all unified. We just have to get past the deeply corrupt corporate media and the deeply corrupt politicians in Washington. Okay, I promised you some responses, so I'll do that. YouTube members, Mary Cross 4204 says, the Iranian people are upset with this MOU too. They won't see any of that $300 billion. Oh no, yeah, of course. Look, guys, the Iranian regime is not filled with angels and saints. No, the Iranian regime is fundamentalist and corrupt. So I love that they're taking on Israel. I don't love that they're taking on us. We shouldn't have been in that war in the first place. And if you're being honest about it, you have to give them credit for defending Lebanon and defending the Palestinians. They're literally the only country in the world that's doing that. And now I'm seeing memes all over internet saying, the rest of the Muslim countries should, hide their head in shame for never helping the Palestinians, never helping the Lebanese. And in our disgusting lying corporate media, they say, what do you mean? Those are terrorists. What do you mean terrorists? Hezbollah lives in Lebanon. Israel is taking their homes, the homes of innocent civilians, the homes of Christians, the homes of Muslims. And our lying media is saying that it's an act of terrorism to defend your own home, that you must surrender to the Israelis and give up all of your worldly possessions to the Israelis, otherwise you're a terrorist. No, that's maniacal. So Iran is helping them. Look, I feel the same way about that government as I do about the Turkish government. Erdogan, from time to time, stands up against Israel, and when Muslims are hurt either by war or natural disasters, Erdogan does a great job of helping other Muslims throughout the world. And so it partly pains me to say that because at home, he's taking away democracy. And so I can't stand what he's doing at home. When I mean home, obviously I'm referring to their home, and as opposed to what Turkey's doing abroad. Now, in Iran's home, the Iranian regime is terrible. They've taken away people's freedoms, and they do oppress others, and they do use corruption. They do have massive corruption. So no, the 300 billion isn't going to be like, given out to all the people pro rata, right? And you're all going to get your fair share in Iran. That would be amazing, but that's not what's going to happen. But will they rebuild parts of Iran? Yes. If that comes to fruition, I'm sure that they will rebuild parts of Iran, and that will help the Iranian people. But yes, I'm sure the mullahs and the regime will take a huge chunk of it. And one of the things that I'm trying to explain to our Iranian brothers and sisters that live here in America is just because you hate the regime doesn't mean that a war against the regime is a good idea. In fact, as we said, and unfortunately we were proven right, it'll be counterproductive and it'll make the regime even stronger because people will rally around the flag. And that's of course exactly what's happened. And we even have Persian friends here in LA who started out as rah, let's go war, and they believe the Israeli fantasies about how easy it would be and the government would get toppled overnight and freedom would break out all over Iran. Now you think, how in the world could they have believed that nonsense? Because it's hard not to hope. They want to go back home. They want their loved ones in Iran to be free. And I get that, and I have great sympathy for that. So they couldn't see straight. But now at this point, at least if they're Muslim Persian, there a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are beginning to see, you were right. They're dropping bombs on our families. How does that help? And you're right, the regime got stronger, not weaker. So there's a right way to go about things. All right, on Twitch, Catch a Butterfly says, white phosphorus is a horrifying way to die. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And by the way, it is arguably a weapon of mass destruction. And you'll win that argument. But as long as it's Israel doing it, America says, yeah, of course. If Iran might get a weapon of mass destruction many years from now, if Iraq might have weapons of mass destruction decades from now, good enough reason to attack them and kill thousands of people, and in the case of Iraq, maybe up to 1 million. But if our ally, Israel, uses a weapon of mass destruction and has 40 nukes and threatens everyone with it, and uses their military to attack their neighbors, that's all fine. And that's how you could know who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. Did Israel get us to attack 7 neighbors? Did they themselves attack 7 neighbors? Yes. Are they in the southern Lebanon now? Yes. Did they take 60% of Gaza? Yes. Do they have the nukes? Yes. Are they using weapons of mass destruction now? Yes. So why is our media wholesale lying for them? I mean, that is a bare minimum question that everyone has to ask. Of course, and if you ask it, they'll try to ruin your life, which again goes to show, sorry, but you're not really on our side, and you're not really our media. You're not ours, and you're not media. You're propaganda. Quincy Magoo says, Israeli settlers spat at Christian nuns as they walked down the Via Dolorosa, a historical path in the old city of occupied East Jerusalem that holds immense significance for Christians. That is also true. I've seen it with my own eyes. People have reported it over and over again. And Mike Huckabee, who obviously works for the Israelis, our so-called ambassador to Israel, it's so true that he couldn't even deny it when talking to Tucker Carlson. Well, not that bad. They don't spit on too many people. No, they spit on Christians on a regular basis. I mean, that's how you could tell they're religious fundamentalists, because that'll ruin tourism. If you just cared about the health of the economy and the well-being of Israel, spitting on Christian tourists is the single worst thing you could possibly do. But the government lets them. There's no punishment. The government of Israel is totally out of control. Look, I think that a lot of Jewish Americans have already seen that, but I think more and more are going to begin to see that as we go along. Like if you told a lot of folks in that community now, Israel might use a nuke, they'd be like, that's crazy, no way. That's the most anti-Semitic thing I've ever heard. If Israel does use a nuke, what happens to those guys? Do they still hold on to this belief that Israel is some beautiful angelic creature that can do no wrong? Or do they snap out of it and wake up to the reality that Israel is not what they thought it was? That it's become something that is fundamentalist in a way that is unrecognizable to them. So a lot of them are already there. And remember, 63% of Jewish Americans are on our side and against the current Israeli government. All right, we're gonna take a quick break here. When we come back, Jim Acosta, how does he feel about what's happening in the media and what's happening in politics today? We'll talk to him when we return. My next guest has been called a major loser, a major sleazebag, and one of the worst and most dishonest reporters in journalistic history. That's the bad news. The good news is it was Donald Trump who called him all those, so it must be the exact opposite. Jim Acosta, welcome to TYT.
Hey, good to see you, Shank. Great introduction. It's been a while since I've heard those names.
Indeed, look, point of pride for you. No question. That means you're doing your job. Jim, let's start with media, and then we'll go to current events. And obviously, we've got a lot of big current events that we're going to discuss here. But I remember we had Sam Donaldson on the Young Turks almost 20 years ago now, and he told this amazing story about how whenever the Reagan White House or the Clinton White House called up Roone Arledge to complain about questions Donaldson was asking them that was too tough, he would give Donaldson a raise. And that's amazing story, beautiful story, right? That's how journalism used to be. Now you worked at CBS and you worked at CNN. As you see what's happening at those organizations, especially CBS, how do you feel about the state of journalism these days?
It's painful to watch. And I assume what Barry Weiss is going to do to CNN is very similar to what she's done to CBS, which is to politicize the editorial process. And all you have to do is look to somebody who I respect very much, Scott Pelley, who was fired by CBS. And he said just recently that CBS and Barry's team was asking him to put falsehoods into pieces, to politicize his pieces. And if Scott Pelley is saying that, there's something really wrong that's going on. And my sense of it is that what is going to happen to CNN is something that we just haven't really seen before in this country, where you have the nation's primary 24-hour cable news outlet taken over by right-wing ideologues. And it may not happen all in one big moment. It may happen little by little. This may happen one bite at a time. But look what's happened over at CBS. You have 60 Minutes and the turmoil that they've gone through. The CBS Evening News is anchored by Tony Ducouple, and he was saying things like, "Marco Rubio, we salute you" at the end of the CBS Evening News a few months ago, and that sort of thing. I mean, it's just awful stuff, and it's not in keeping with the tradition of Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather and Bob Schiefert and Edward R. Murrow. And the days of Sam Donaldson, I guess maybe I got a taste of that, in the latter days of my time at CNN when Jeff Zucker was in charge at CNN. People might like or dislike certain things that were done during his time running CNN. But when I was there, and just to go back to your Roone Arledge story, Jeff was, he was behind me 100%. He had my back 100%. He wasn't telling me, hey, lay off of Donald Trump. All of that started to change as soon as Jeff was out the door. And, it breaks my heart to see what's taking place there right now.
Yeah, so let's stay on that though, because Jim was the chief White House correspondent for CNN. Now, of course, he does the Jim Acosta show. And so, Jim, look, I'm not sure that the national media had covered themselves in glory even before the takeover of CBS and CNN. And so, folks were tougher on Trump, and we saw that with our eyes, and certainly you were, right? But when it came to people like Joe Biden, it was kid gloves, and I thought it was obvious that he was, losing his faculties, and obvious enough that I said it on the air, well over a year before the debate, and we did a petition on here that our viewers signed, like we got to get a new candidate. This guy can't finish sentences. So has there been way too much deference to people in power overall?
I think that's part of it. Honestly, I think that we were running up against some longtime Washington traditions when Donald Trump came into town, and there was probably too much deference being paid to whichever party was in power in the Oval Office. And I mean, look at the run up to the Iraq War. There weren't enough questions asked then. And I will say during the Biden administration, I was anchoring a show on CNN at that time. I had guests on my show. We talked about Biden's cognitive health, whether or not he was up to the challenge of running for another term. So, I did that on my show. I can't answer for everybody else. But I will say the thing that concerns me probably more than anything right now is that Donald Trump has cracked the code in how to hurt the news media in this country. He has figured out that if you use the power of the FCC, if you use the power of leverage over these media deals and acquisitions, sort of like the Paramount WBD merger, you can force television and news executives to sort of take a kid glove approach to the administration. And one thing we should mention is, maybe too much deference was paid to previous presidents, but we're in a different place right now where Donald Trump, I think, represents a threat to American democracy. And he's made that very clear over and over again. And so to me, this is a moment where the press should not be bending the knee. They should be holding his feet to the fire. And look at the way this Iran deal has been reported. You've got these big, huge headlines saying, "Oh, there's a deal. A deal has been reached." What deal? It looks to me that Donald Trump was looking for an exit ramp, and he caved and he capitulated. And so, my sense of it is that we're in a really bad place right now because the media is not doing it's just not doing its job these days. And Trump is taking full advantage of that.
Yeah, so I want to come back to corporate media in a minute because it is corporate, and that is part of the issue. And we're seeing that play out now, where their corporate interests are reigning supreme certainly over the journalism. But let's talk about that deal and some current events, because I'm curious about your take, and we might have some disagreements. So, Jim, I get it. The deal is worse than what Obama got. and Iran comes out a little bit stronger at the end of the war, if it comes to fruition. On the other hand, I'm for peace. So, and this is not before the war, this is after we lost our leverage, after they closed the Strait of Hormuz. So if the memorandum of understanding holds, wouldn't it be a good thing overall though?
Sure, absolutely. But how many times have we seen Donald Trump taco? It's not Taco Tuesday, I guess, or did that happen on Taco? I lose track. It's, what a year this week has been. But, I do think, yes, of course, if this memorandum of understanding holds, obviously that's a good thing. But, look at the way that the Iranians have been incentivized in all of this. They took a pounding, there's no question about it, but they have a much younger leadership running the regime now. And I think it's only a matter of time before they try to reconstitute what they had been trying to establish before, which is a nuclear weapons program. The Obama nuclear deal, which I covered during the second Obama administration, was much tougher. You had international inspectors going in, you had major world powers looking over Iran's shoulder. That's just not the case now. And I think what Donald Trump has done over this past week is endangered the entire world. And you have folks on both sides of the aisle saying this. It's not just me, obviously. I think he has emboldened the Iranians, and they have figured out how to use leverage when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz and so on. So, Cenk, if they can somehow, he can pull a rabbit out of his hat and not muck this up the way he's mucked up the reflecting pool and the Kennedy Center and everything else, then maybe this will be something that we can all say, okay, that was an accomplishment. But at this point, past being prologue, it's hard to put a whole lot of stock into anything that he's saying right now. I mean, he originally said that he was not going to take anything less than unconditional surrender. And in the last 24 hours, he's been saying, well, the Iranians can keep their missile program. Other people in the region have missiles. Why can't the Iranians have missiles? That's a far cry from what he was promising to the American public when this all got started.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, look, Donald Trump's going to change his opinion and his stance like 12 times in a day. All I want is peace at the end, right? And so, but let's talk about why we got into the war in the first place. Look, the war is a disaster because it had no chance of success. So, the Israelis said that, they won't be able to close the Strait of Hormuz and they won't be able to attack our bases in the Gulf states. I don't know why in the world anybody would think that. I think that they were probably just lying. Everybody knew, other than Donald Trump apparently, that would happen. And so, given that we weren't going to be able to open the strait, this was a fait accompli that this war would be a disaster, and Iran would come out stronger. And by the way, not only would we come out weaker, Israel would come out weaker. But Israel demanded the war, and so I mean that goes to the core issue of, in my opinion, all of politics. Don't the donors get everything that they demand?
Yeah, I mean, the writing was on the wall at the beginning of all of this. And I will tell you, going back to my time covering the second Obama administration, I had never seen the Obama people get as pissed as they were when Netanyahu spoke to a joint session of Congress and was slamming the Obama-Iran nuclear deal and the progress that was being made towards a deal. And they thought that he had come in and completely undermined an American administration right under their noses. And they were furious about it. I remember this because I covered it pretty closely. And, this has been reported and it's been said by others that other presidents have basically been given the same case from Netanyahu as to why, the Iranian regime should be toppled and, they're on the verge of a nuclear weapon and so on. And other American presidents from both parties have said, not so fast. We're not going to get ourselves embroiled in a conflict like this because there could be major consequences. Donald Trump did not think this through, obviously. And I don't know if it's because we're in the latter stages of, what his capabilities are as president of the United States. And he was just, he just wanted Netanyahu out of his hair. I don't know. It's hard to know the psychology of all of this. But he launched into this without thinking through the consequences. And I just, I really worry about what's to come down the pike. I'm all for peace too. 100%, Cenk. I would love to see this turn into peace across the Middle East. There's no question about it. But the players that are involved have proven themselves to be pretty unreliable in that regard. And Donald Trump, he'll just move on to the next thing. and try to distract the public with something else. And who's going to keep an eye on the Iranians in all of this? I mean, I think that's a big question.
Yeah, so Jim, look, that gets the core of the issue, in my opinion. So I criticize Obama from the left a lot. Ran into issues at MSNBC back then when I was hosting there on that issue. But I love the JCPOA. I thought it was one of the best things that he did. And in order to do that, he had to stand up to the Israeli lobby. And the Israeli lobby didn't want that because they wanted the threat of Iran being able to have nukes so that they could declare war and get regime change. And they've been pushing for that all along. And so, I call this Miriam's war because the Adelson family gave $317 million to Donald Trump over 3 election cycles. They brag about it. Miriam said, "I'll give you $250 million more if you violate the Constitution and run for a 3rd term." She said that on tape, right? So we aired it. And so, but it's not just the Israelis. You've got Big Pharma, who is an even bigger lobby in most election cycles, and we can't negotiate drug prices in America. That's mental. That's the opposite of a free market, and it feels like nobody even notes it. Big oil gets $35 billion in subsidies every year. That's insane. Why would an average taxpayer have to give ExxonMobil money out of their pockets when they're the most profitable companies in the world? So, Jim, it connects back to the media, because why isn't the media pointing out all of these just absolute outrages that the donors demand and get on a regular basis?
It's a good question. And I mean, you can add in the military industrial complex. Remember, it was Dwight Eisenhower, a Republican, who warned the American people about this permanent war stance that the nation would be put on if you had this massive defense industry making gazillions of dollars off of selling weapons around the world. I mean, there's that part of this too. I worry greatly about this. In terms of the money in our politics, I agree with you. I think that our political system in the United States is awash in dark money. It is corrupting our politics. The politicians up on Capitol Hill, many of them should just wear labels on their suits, the way that race car drivers have branding and sponsors on their suits. Members of Congress probably should have the same thing too. It is an ungodly system that we have in this country, where basically politicians can be bought and sold by corporate interests. And I really think if you want to clean up our political system in this country, if you want to get this country back on track, why not move to public financing of campaigns? Get corporate money out of politics. Have public financing of campaigns so you don't have politicians who are bought and sold, because it raises all of the questions that you're raising. It makes you wonder, was this move made because this president or that senator or that congressperson is getting donations from a very powerful company? I mean, you brought up healthcare in this country. We don't have. I mean, why don't we have national healthcare in this country? It's an absolute crime that we don't have national healthcare. We have this crazy cockamamie insurance system. You're talking about Obama and giving him credit for the JCPOA. A lot of people would give him credit for Obamacare. There's no question about it. But one of the things that Obamacare did was it preserved the private insurance system in this country. And you have to think that the corporate interests were involved in saving their own necks in all of it. Remember when the public option, we're old enough to remember when the public option was hotly debated as part of Obamacare. They ripped that puppy out because the insurance industry did not want to have it. And so, we're in a lot of trouble right now because of the money that is flowing through our politics. It's absolutely corrupting it. There's no question about it.
Yeah, but again, that gets me. Of course, I totally agree with everything you just said there. That gets me back to the issues with media, and we're both in media, so that's the important conversation. So even before this new round of over-the-top corruption in media that we've gotten in Trump's second term, so. For example, Obama would say during the Obamacare fight, well, we can't win this fight if we don't have the drug companies on our side. And so that's why the drug companies were kind of left out of the bill and we didn't get universal health care, et cetera. I mean, that was an open conversation. Well, aren't you then saying my own party, because he did for a moment there have 60 senators in the House, my own party is too corrupt? But then when I see the media yeah, if we're having a conversation like this, you know, we could intellectually agree. Of course, it's money in politics. It's clear, etc. But then they're talking to politicians and they never hold them accountable. They never ask them about the money. They never ask them, hey, wait, are you voting this way because you got basically legally bribed by this industry and that industry? That never happens. So what's going on? Is it that they're, you know, need the access, or there's just a culture in national media that you have to, you know, be polite and gentle and civil and flattering to the politicians?
You know, I think part of it is, you know, and listen, I came out of the corporate media world, but you know, I had my own maverick streak in me, and maybe it got me in a little too much trouble at times. But you know, I will tell you, I do think to some extent the corporate media, they are afraid to take this issue on because they are, you know, they are run by corporations. They're run by very large, very powerful, moneyed interests in this country. There's just no question about it. The question becomes, how do we improve that coverage? And I would love to see a lot more of it. I mean, when I was there at CNN for many, many years, and when I was at CBS, you know, I did stories from time to time on campaign fundraising. Of course, we all covered McCain-Feingold when John McCain was trying to get a lot of this corrupt money out of politics. You know, that was something that was heavily covered, but it has kind of gone radio silent. The Citizens United decision has just opened up the floodgates of this kind of money into our politics. And you know, I've had Sheldon Whitehouse on. Of course, he's been leading the charge on this. I've had others. And so I try to bang this drum as often as I can, because I do think it is very destructive. But as to why the media, why they don't cover it enough, I think it's probably because of the ownership of these various outlets. And, you know, perhaps there's pressure coming from within. I never personally got pressure. I never had anybody, you know, call me up and say, hey, Jim, you need to lay off of this story over here or that story over there because it's brought to you by Big Pharma or something like that. I never got that kind of a call. But there, you know, and I think also there's a part of it in that there's maybe a laziness and just a not enough of a commitment being put to covering those kinds of hard stories, investigative stories that require this kind of work. And that's why it's so scary what's happening over at CBS in 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes, which blew the cover off of the tobacco industry. You know, the famous movie The Insider that was based on 60 Minutes caving to the tobacco industry years ago. And then they finally did report what was going on, that the tobacco industry was manipulating nicotine levels in cigarettes. And it was a massive scandal in this country. It led to all kinds of lawsuits and the tobacco industry getting a major hit in the US. Is 60 Minutes going to cover those kinds of stories now that they've been taken over by Barry Weiss and the Ellisons? I seriously doubt it. And as I've been saying lately, we need a 60 Minute story on 60 Minutes because, you know, what is taking, I mean, you think things are bad now, Cenk. Give it 5 years when, you know, the Ellisons have firmly taken control of CNN. And as I've been saying on my show, it's on Substack, YouTube, all the other places. I've been asking the question: what's stopping them from gobbling up ABC? What's stopping them from gobbling up NBC? People will say, "Oh, well, there's no way that'll happen." Well, it's happening now. CBS and Paramount, they're gobbling up CNN, and apparently they're already having talks about merging these two news divisions. And so people need to wake up to what's happening in this country. I'm very concerned that we are marching down the road towards state control over the news media in this country. I've been calling it state compromised media, because once you get into a situation where you have companies paying bribes, essentially bribes to the president of the United States, kowtowing to the president in order to get mergers and acquisitions through, it's a slippery slope from there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And they don't even have to buy ABC and NBC because now everyone, the intimidation has set in. So
yes, that's right.
Right, and so it's a culture of intimidation. Look, my hope is that they're going to MySpace all these companies. You know, when Murdoch bought MySpace, it was super hot,
right? And
then it instantly went bankrupt because Murdoch bought it. And so I think that there's some chance that Ellison is going to waste a tremendous amount of money. And you know, some people think it's a shame that those old storied brands will go out of business, but I think they will. I mean, right now CBS's average audience is above 70 years old. And so,
yeah.
I think they're in a world of trouble. But one more thing about the media. So look, as a person again on the left and as a populist and an outsider in so many different ways, my experience is that the media, again, even before this latest bad turn, has deference to insiders, but loves ripping apart outsiders. So when you've got outsiders, and look, on the right, some of the outsiders are really kooky, right? Like you got the Herschel Walkers and all that, no question, right? And that's a target-rich environment. But also on the left, I mean, I think the media was vicious to Bernie Sanders and barely laid a glove on Hillary. I don't know if you might disagree. Certainly barely laid a glove on Biden, right? And so Graham Plattner, okay, New York Times called every ex-girlfriend he has. Was that done to, Chuck Schumer? Was that done to any of the insiders? So
I don't know. Sometimes journalists just want to scoop, and that whole saga is very strange and peculiar to me because it sounds as though there was an ex-campaign staffer who sort of coordinated this hit on Graham Plattner. Now, we'll have to see how things play out with Plattner. It sounds as though there are people who have been complaining about what he's been doing in his own personal life, but that's his personal life. And so, I would like to see how that one plays out personally. But, in terms of Bernie Sanders, there's no question about it that the media, by and large, the corporate news media, the legacy news media, did not treat Bernie Sanders with the level of respect that he probably deserved. And sometimes, Cenk, I'll just tell you, some of these companies, some of these outlets, they're just behind the curve. And they almost have to be led by the nose, with the American people pulling them along to say, see, look over here. This is a real story, what's happening over here with the Bernie Sanders campaign. And I remember that full well. And it was after a while that people started, in my line of work, started to really pay close attention to what he was doing with that campaign. And it was absolutely extraordinary what he mounted in that race against Hillary Clinton. There's just no question about it. And so, listen, if I could throw myself on the mercy of the court, I would, and accept responsibility for everybody in corporate media. But I will tell you, as best as I could when I was in my job at the time, I tried to be independent. I tried to hold both sides accountable. I tried to hold their feet to the fire because I think that's what the people at home want. They want us to be tough. They don't want us to play kid gloves. And when you talk about Bernie Sanders out on the campaign trail. When I was out on the campaign trail with Donald Trump in 2016, it was absolutely apparent to me that he was a grave and gathering threat to our democracy. The way he was going after the news media, the way he was talking about locking up Hillary Clinton, and so on. This was obviously an ultranationalist campaign that was being mounted in 2016, and it was not covered as such. And now we are all paying the price for it, I think, in the long run, because it was it was not appreciated for the grave and gathering threat that it was. And certainly in 2024, it was not reported on as the threat that it was. I mean, I will tell you, I was tough as nails and reported on him each and every day for all of the stuff that he did and all the crazy things that he said. I'm your retribution. Immigrants, that they represent a threat to this country. What did he say? They're poisoning the blood of our country. I mean, we were playing that on a loop on my show to warn the public of what was coming down the pike. And to some extent, Cenk, the media, they just aren't willing to go the extra mile, I think, in holding leaders accountable when they need to be held accountable. They're, as you were saying earlier, they're afraid in many cases of losing access. They're afraid of losing that availability with the candidate or with the president. Look at the way Donald Trump threw out the Associated Press out of the Oval Office. I was saying when that happened that all of the other news outlets in DC should have been up in arms and said, listen, if you don't let the Associated Press back into the Oval Office and on Air Force One, none of us are going to cover you. And so, I just think that there's got to be a lot more steel in the spine of our legacy media these days, or we're in really big trouble. I really believe that.
Yeah, I mean, Trump said that he'd lock up political opponents. I mean, but what's the chance that's gonna? So Right, that did happen. It did happen.
That did happen.
Yeah,
that's right.
And
Gavin Newsom just said this week, the FBI is investigating him. The media should be all over that. They're investigating a potential 2028 presidential candidate. That should be an alarm bell going off for our democracy.
Yeah.
And the media is just not covering it as such. You don't see these kinds of stories on the nightly news because I think they're afraid of losing the access. And it's to the detriment of all of us when that happens.
So speaking of fear, last question here, Jim, and this is a tough one. Yeah. It's a tough one to talk about, and it's built into the question that it's tough, right? Is that, look, first of all, let me just acknowledge what you said to the audience. No, you did have a maverick streak. We did notice, and that's why we're having this conversation, right? And so, and it was appreciated. And look, I love outsiders and I love populists, but I could smell that Trump was a fake populist from a mile away. I mean, natural born con man. He didn't mean a word he said in those regards. And so when he said the things that sounded dictatorial, I knew he meant it. And I was super worried about it. And we warned about it in 2016. And I remember saying on election night, buckle up, brace for impact, right? Because we're gonna hit this thing and it's not gonna be pretty. The second term's been way worse. Okay, now to the final question. So look, Jim, on Israel, take everything we've been talking about in regards to the media, and in my opinion, multiply it by a couple of hundred, right? The room feels like it's filled with fear. Like if I criticize Israel, there's going to be consequences. It might affect my career. I'm not going to do it. Like some people think that there are memos and conspiratorial and all that stuff. No. I was there. There are no memos. People don't, like, it's not like that at all, right? But is there a culture of intimidation and fear about criticizing Israel? I sensed it, and I'm curious what your sense of it was.
I just never felt that. I never really dealt with that, and I'm being totally honest with you. I never got a memo or a phone call or a vibe or a wink or anything that said, you need to lay off of Israel. I will say that, I thought my coverage was very tough on Netanyahu. I mean, I was, when October 7th happened, obviously, there was a lot of coverage in terms of what took place there and the sympathy that absolutely needed to be shown to the Israeli people who were traumatized and all of that. But once Netanyahu started to push things too far in Gaza, on my show, we were covering that. And so, I get the frustration. I think there's a real understanding there that people can be frustrated about the coverage and say, hey, wait a minute, where were you guys? It's easy to lump everybody together. But I never felt that. I never experienced that. And my sense of it is that you just, when you cover this stuff, the facts are the facts. You just have to cover them as they come in on a daily basis. And if that means, being tough on, I had a spokesperson for the Israeli government come on one time. This was in the post-October 7th era. And, I was talking to them about, why was Netanyahu making it possible for money to flow to Hamas? Doesn't he have some culpability there in that regard? And I don't think they like that very much. I will tell you, when I was asking those questions, I don't think they like that very much. And so, my sense of it is, you just have to ask the hard questions. That is what is expected of us. I talk to young folks all the time, go talk to college students who want to become journalists and so on. I say, if you want to be liked, go be a veterinarian. Don't become a journalist because you're not going to be liked very much. And maybe there are some of my colleagues who just want to be liked too much. And maybe that's what it is. But my mom always told me, don't be the wallflower, let others be the wallflower. And you just have to cover things that way. It's sort of the way you opened this conversation, talking about Sam Donaldson, when he was getting in trouble with the Reagan administration and so on, he would go and get a raise. That's how it should be. I remember there was a time in this business, if somebody at the White House had called my boss or that boss's boss and complained about a story I was doing, that boss would tell the White House to go to hell. And that my reporter is there doing his job, asking the hard questions. And by the way, they have our support 100%. I don't get that that's what's happening right now in our media. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem because the person who is in the White House right now is just not. He is just not somebody who is going to be there when it comes to preserving and protecting American democracy. And my concern is that the media is only emboldening him in that regard.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But you know, so you did ask those tough questions, and you were one of the first let go by CNN.
Yes.
So,
and I will tell you, it happened the very first week of the administration, and you know there was absolutely pressure for me to go, and there's no question about it. And you know, for folks to say that wasn't the case, they're just not telling the truth. But yeah, there's no question about it. I was pressured to leave, and I believe it's because of the coverage that I did of Donald Trump. I just don't. Why would you think anything else?
By the way, though, Jim, it could be that it was also definitely not just, but also your coverage of Netanyahu.
Perhaps, I don't know. You know, who's to say? But it certainly seemed to coincide with a certain president of the United States who was coming back into office, and you know, I was out the door a week after he got back in.
Yeah. So that message was not subtle.
Rest is history. Yeah. No, it's not subtle at all. You know, the timing was, you know, and I thought to myself, wouldn't anybody think that this is suspicious? And of course it was. So.
Of course. And that's an enormous badge of honor. So good enough reason on that alone, let alone everything else, to check out the Jim Acosta show. Jim, really appreciate you coming on here. So check him out on YouTube, Substack, and everywhere you can get the Jim Acosta show. We appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Shank. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. All right, guys, that's what we got for you tonight. I'll see you tomorrow. Oh, no, wait, hold on. It's Juneteenth tomorrow. We're actually off, but I probably will see you because I'll probably wind up doing a YouTube live. But have a wonderful weekend, guys, and we'll see you on Monday.